There is a power residing deep within every human being, a power unseen by the naked eye, yet possessing the capacity to build or crumble our inner world. This is the power of the mind. A strong mind doesn't beg for respect. It inherently commands it without the need for a single uttered word. Seek to build a mind so sharp, so steady, so fundamentally unshakable that weakness itself trembles in its presence. When you truly master your thoughts, you claim dominion over your entire life. This is not merely a catchy phrase, but a foundational law of existence and achievement. Conversely, if your mind remains fragile, fractured by doubt, and easily swayed by external forces, your true potential remains perpetually trapped. It is like a fortress with crumbling walls, unable to safeguard the treasures held within. Discipline serves as your primary sword in this internal battle, while focused attention becomes your impenetrable shield. The ability to exercise control over your inner landscape and outer actions is your power. These are not qualities granted to a chosen few. They are tools accessible to anyone willing to undertake the deliberate process of their forging and mastery. Will you commit to the relentless training of your mind? Will you train it to rise deliberately and powerfully above every pervasive fear, every nagging doubt, every distracting noise that incessantly seeks to define you and dictate your trajectory? Or will you permit your mind to be controlled by the swirling chaos of the external world, becoming a passive vessel, tossed about by forces beyond your internal governance? The fundamental decision on which path to take must be made now. It is precisely at that singular point of conscious decision that the world around you will begin to respond accordingly, mirroring the internal state you choose to cultivate. In just moments from now, we will delve layer by layer, pillar by distinct pillar, into the precise architecture and method required to build a mind so profoundly strong that the pervasive forces of fear and doubt lose their ability to stand, much less challenge your path forward. This isn't mystical or fleeting advice. This is the systematic blueprint for unleashing the profound greatness lying dormant within your mental landscape. The first pillar upon which this structure stands, the power of unwavering self-belief. Most individuals tragically underestimate the incredible landscape that exists within the confines of their own minds. They perceive it as a territory subject to chance or external validation, oblivious to the reality that it is in fact a fortress of unlimited waiting potential. When you genuinely possess absolute conviction in your own capabilities, a certainty that penetrates beyond surface-level positive thinking, something truly remarkable begins to unfold. Obstacles do not necessarily cease to exist, but they dissolve as perceived impenetrable barriers along your path, transformed instead into mere challenges to be navigated. Consider for a prolonged moment what precisely separates those who ultimately achieve undeniable greatness from the vast majority who merely spend their lives dreaming idly about it. Is it solely intelligence, superior resources, pre-existing connections? While these factors certainly play supporting roles, acting as amplification tools, at the fundamental core stands unwavering self-belief. It is the bedrock, that immovable and resilient foundation upon which empires, be they literal empires or personal empires of influence and accomplishment, are constructed and maintained. Why does this quality of self-belief matter so profoundly, so fundamentally? Because the dimensions of your life expand, or tragically contract, in direct, undeniable proportion to the depth and robustness of your internal belief system. When debilitating doubt manages to creep insidiously into your mental space, possibilities do not just diminish, they seem to vanish entirely. Your vision narrows, your energy drains, your capacity for decisive action becomes paralyzed. But when genuine certainty takes deep root and holds firm, previously perceived insurmountable mountains become in reality traversable molehills. The challenges remain, but their perceived scale is utterly transformed. Society, through a myriad of overt and subtle channels, constantly assails you with messages of limitation. Be realistic, they often caution, often projecting their own unfulfilled potentials. Know your place, their ingrained norms seem to whisper. These are invisible psychological chains that subtly wrap around your thinking, actively restricting the boundaries of what you even dare to pursue or imagine for yourself. But consider this: What if those limitations so universally accepted exist solely and exclusively within the confines of your own imagination? What if through the disciplined process of systematic mental conditioning, you could deliberately shatter those perceived barriers, forever revealing the expansive territory beyond? Now we arrive at the crucial actionable question: how exactly does one deliberately forge this elevated level of truly unshakable confidence, this inner knowing? Begin by conducting a rigorous ongoing audit of every single thought that crosses the threshold of your mind. Become fiercely vigilant about which narratives, which internal dialogues you consciously permit to take residence within your consciousness. Your mind is fundamentally like a garden. You are the absolute gatekeeper. You possess the inherent right to decide which seeds of thought are allowed to be planted and take root. Whenever a limiting belief overtly or subtly appears, manifesting as "I'm simply not qualified enough," or "people like me never truly succeed at this," or "it's too hard for someone like me," you must immediately and forcefully replace it with its empowering, authentic counterpart. This isn't mere superficial, positive thinking. It is the deliberate, repeated action of laying down a new neural pathway, consciously overriding the old. Speak to yourself internally and even sometimes externally, with the resonant conviction of absolute certainty. Transform passive suggestions into declarations of undeniable reality. "I will try" is far too weak. It must actively transform into "I will succeed without question." "I possess the capacity to do this" becomes a much stronger "I possess exceptional and inherent capability for this endeavor." This internal declaration isn't empty bravado. It is the deliberate focusing and directing of your mental and emotional energy towards the desired outcome. Look to the historical account of Clarence Augustus Bartlett, a man from Yorkshire. In the year 1962, he stood resolutely before the British Parliament, not for the first time, but remarkably having faced a soul-testing 17 rejections previously for the same objective. What profound quality distinguished him from those who would have surrendered after the first, third, or 10th no? While his opponents sought to undermine him, often mocking his humble background as the son of a simple coal miner, viewing it as an inherent limitation, Bartlett responded not with defensive words, but with a statement delivered with such quiet authority, such deep inner conviction, that it resonated through and utterly silenced the entire chamber. With unwavering presence, he declared, "My father taught me that a man's true worth isn't measured solely by his starting point in life, nor the advantages he's given, but rather by his profound and unyielding unwillingness to ever accept defeat as a final concluding verdict." That statement was not merely a personal philosophy. It was an overt declaration of absolute self-forged belief and iron will that refused to be broken or defined by adversity and external judgment. 6 short months following that powerful and resonant declaration, Bartlett successfully passed the landmark legislation he had relentlessly pursued, a law that fundamentally transformed and significantly expanded educational opportunities for working-class children throughout the entirety of England. The 17 rejections were in hindsight merely temporary markers along a path paved with an absolute belief in the possibility of success. Are you currently accepting limitations that exist in brutal reality, solely within the intricate architecture of your own mind? Have you perhaps unconsciously confused temporary navigable obstacles with truly permanent, impenetrable barriers? What extraordinary life-altering achievements are waiting patiently for you once you finally gather the internal fortitude and courage to deliberately demolish these artificial, self-imposed constraints? Your latent potential remains in a state of profound dormancy until it is activated, ignited, and unleashed by the raw, undeniable power of absolute belief, a burning conviction that the thing you desire is inherently possible for you. Pay close attention to what tangible changes occur when you consciously begin operating from a place of truly unshakable self-forged confidence. The dynamic with others fundamentally shifts. People around you will respond differently. Some may become overtly uncomfortable, perhaps even noticeably intimidated. They instinctively sense that something significant has fundamentally shifted within you, something they cannot quite name or immediately identify. That quiet yet magnetic certainty emanating from your core becomes a powerful, palpable force, a force that simultaneously attracts those aligned with your aspirations and unsettlingly discomfits those who are inwardly committed, perhaps unconsciously, to their own patterns of ingrained mediocrity. When everyone in your immediate sphere is visibly settling for predictably average results, yet you stand firm and centered in your unyielding conviction for a path of genuine excellence, it creates a striking contrast that can indeed quietly terrorize those who are complacent and content with less. It holds an uncomfortable mirror to their own accepted limitations. Make no mistake, deliberately developing and maintaining this elevated level of unshakable self-belief requires conscious, sustained, and profound effort. It is not a gift magically bestowed, nor will it materialize spontaneously through passive, hopeful wishing. This is daily mental labor. Every morning, make it a non-negotiable ritual to vividly visualize your success. Experience it mentally with such intricate multisensory detail, feeling the emotions, hearing the sounds, seeing the outcomes that your subconscious mind cannot fundamentally distinguish the detailed mental rehearsal from physical, tangible reality. Throughout each and every day, proactively speak and repeat powerful affirmations, internal declarations that reinforce your perceived unstoppable nature and your inherent worthiness of success. Diligently study the tangible achievements of others, especially those historical figures who faced objectively greater, more imposing obstacles, yet unequivocally prevailed through the sheer driving force of their unwavering belief. Are you truly ready deep within to undertake the work required to build a mind so powerfully resilient, so strategically designed that pervasive doubt cannot fundamentally penetrate its self-forged walls? Can you make a conscious binding commitment to this transformative internal journey, knowing full well that once the process is truly complete, you may become fundamentally unrecognizable to those who previously knew only your former, less realized self? The challenging yet rewarding journey commences not with a grand gesture, but with a single conscious decision. Will you continue day after day, week after week, accepting the comfort of artificial limitations, boundaries manufactured by past experiences or societal whispers? Or will you courageously embrace, explore, and fully unleash the boundless, extraordinary potential that objectively already exists within the intricate landscape of you? Decide now. The architecture of your mind is waiting. The second pillar, supporting and enabling the first, mastering disciplined daily habits. Every truly extraordinary achievement recorded throughout the sweeping scope of human history, every groundbreaking discovery, every artistic masterpiece, every industry transformed, began not with a single colossal action, but with something deceptively simple and consistently repeated, an unshakable commitment to disciplined daily rituals and habits. These aren't grand, overwhelming gestures, but consistent, deliberate actions performed day after cumulative day, compounding their effects subtly over extensive time, much like compound interest on an investment. Consider deeply what fundamental quality separates the perennial champions of life, those who consistently perform at the highest levels, from those who merely exist within its currents, reacting rather than creating. Great minds are not merely born inherently superior, stamped with some invisible mark of genius from birth. No, they are methodically constructed, meticulously assembled, forged bit by painstaking bit, through consistent, deliberate, and often uncomfortable habits performed day after day after day, regardless of whether it feels convenient in the moment or emotionally comfortable to undertake. This profound mental fortitude, this deep inner resilience, does not appear spontaneously overnight like a sudden gift. It systematically emerges through consistent, disciplined practice. This practice doesn't just reshape your external capabilities or visible skills. It profoundly reshapes and strengthens your very identity. You become the type of person who naturally embodies discipline. Why does this disciplined, habitual approach matter so fundamentally and profoundly? Because your mind, the control center of your entire being, responds to conditioning in precisely the same way your physical body does. Just as muscles only truly strengthen under consistent, challenging resistance, adapting and growing through strain, mental toughness, resilience, and focus deliberately develop through intentional, systematic challenge. The ancient wisdom holds eternally true, resonating across cultures and millennia. We are at the core what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is fundamentally not an occasional spontaneous act performed when inspiration strikes, but rather a relentless, consistent habit cultivated over time. When others observing you from the outside perceive someone who executes their tasks, commitments and vision with a machine-like precision, a steady, unwavering output, regardless of external circumstances, shifting moods or perceived obstacles, it creates a palpable presence. This presence is not necessarily aggressive or loud, but it is deeply intimidating through its sheer, undeniable reliability and consistency. Conversely, those who habitually surrender to the fluctuating tyranny of momentary feelings, yielding to impulses, seeking instant gratification, avoiding discomfort, find themselves perpetually outmaneuvered and implicitly intimidated by those rare individuals who consciously choose to operate their lives based on bedrock principle, established values, and planned trajectory rather than reactive, fleeting impulse. The stark, unwavering consistency of the disciplined mind inherently highlights the inconsistent, wavering nature of the impulse-driven mind, making the latter feel implicitly weaker and less in control. How specifically do you implement this transformative, life-altering approach? Begin by establishing non-negotiable, deeply embedded rituals that form the absolute bedrock foundation of your entire day. Consider the earliest hours sacred. Perhaps resolve to rise at 5 a.m. Not necessarily because the number 5 is magical, but because the act of choosing discipline before the world wakes up is a powerful formative victory. Dedicate the first sacred hour, the golden hour, specifically and exclusively to deliberate mental conditioning. This could involve reading material that genuinely stretches your thinking beyond its current boundaries, engaging in deep focus meditation that anchors and sharpens your scattered attention, or journaling in a way that profoundly clarifies your deepest intentions and most important priorities for the hours ahead. Protect this sacred block of time with a fierce, unwavering vigilance, as if your entire future literally depends upon its preservation and consistent execution, because in truth, it absolutely does. This is the time you are intentionally and systematically fortifying your inner structure. Next, and this is a crucial and often avoided step, identify one uncomfortable, daunting action, a task or conversation that you have consciously or unconsciously been avoiding, a challenge that sits just outside your comfort zone, and make a non-negotiable commitment to actively complete it before the stroke of noon each and every day. This deliberate confrontation with discomfort, this systematic willingness to lean into difficulty actively rewires and reprograms your fundamental neurological response to challenge. Each time you intentionally do something uncomfortable, you are strengthening the neural pathways for courage and resilience, making the next uncomfortable thing slightly less daunting. Look at the historical case of Hiroshi Yamaoka, who orchestrated the transformation of a struggling, unremarkable manufacturing company located in Tokyo into an international powerhouse, a model of efficiency and output. When persistently questioned by journalists and competitors about his extraordinary, seemingly sudden rise to dominance, Yamaoka revealed a profound yet simple daily practice. He stated that for 12 uninterrupted years without exception, he devoted precisely 90 minutes every single morning specifically to rigorously studying international markets and global economic trends, before his competitors even arrived at their offices to begin their standard workdays. While they were still stuck in traffic or checking early emails, he was strategically expanding his knowledge base. While they were operating on reactive, spontaneous impulse, merely responding to incoming challenges, he was already executing his day and his strategy with methodical, informed, strategic precision derived directly from that daily ritual of focus and learning. My singular advantage, he explained with calm certainty to shareholders, was not derived from some innate intellectual genius, nor was it having access to some hidden resources. Rather, my advantage was born solely from disciplined, unwavering consistency. It was showing up and doing the required work day after day at the required time when literally everyone else around me continuously permitted themselves convenient excuses not to. Are you currently perhaps unknowingly allowing your full potential to remain dormant, unexpressed, or severely limited because of inconsistent, sporadic effort? Have you perhaps convinced yourself through a narrative of passive hope that genuine motivation must magically precede disciplined action rather than truly understanding the profound empirical truth that disciplined, consistent action actively creates motivation? What magnificent, extraordinary transformation, both internal and external, awaits you is lying just beneath the surface when you make the unwavering decision to commit to viewing and pursuing excellence, not as an occasional elusive visitor you hope might appear, but as an absolute non-negotiable daily standard you uphold come what may. When your fundamental daily disciplines, those consciously chosen rituals, become deeply embedded and genuinely unshakable, resistant to fleeting moods or external disruptions, something subtly remarkable begins to happen in your interactions with the world. People around you, especially those without such inner structure, become noticeably uncomfortable in your presence. They instinctively sense your profound commitment, your quiet dedication, and this unconsciously exposes and highlights their own patterns of making excuses, their justifications for inconsistency. Your visible, undeniable consistency starkly illuminates their willingness to compromise on their potential, making their choices feel implicitly less valid or powerful in contrast to your own. The vast majority of individuals unconsciously float through life, simply responding moment to whatever feels convenient, whatever requires the least immediate effort. They willingly surrender their long-term potential, often on the easily accessible altar of short-term comfort and immediate gratification. But when you deliberately develop, solidify, and maintain rituals, those core daily disciplines that systematically override the capricious nature of temporary feelings, conscious effort over fleeting emotion, you cultivate an extraordinarily powerful mind. It is a mind that operates predictably, reliably, and effectively according to fundamental guiding principles, established values, and predetermined goals, rather than being tossed unpredictably by shifting preferences, transient moods, or external pressures. Make no mistake in your expectation of this process. This elevated level of deliberate, systematic discipline initially feels profoundly uncomfortable, even actively unnatural, especially in its early stages. Modern society, with its pervasive digital influences and emphasis on instant results, frequently celebrates spontaneity, effortless flow, and instant gratification as ultimate virtues. Consciously swimming against this powerful and pervasive cultural current, this tide of immediate comfort requires a deep, resonant inner conviction that transcends conventional cultural norms and fleeting popular trends. Each new morning, as you stand on the threshold of a fresh day, will invariably present you with the same fundamental recurring choice. You can choose the fleeting temporary comfort that requires no growth, or you can choose the path leading towards permanent, profound greatness that demands daily effort. While the decision made on any single day might seem relatively small in isolation, these small, disciplined daily choices, when compounded consistently over time, accumulate steadily and build the very essential foundation, the bedrock of your entire character and your future reality. Can you make a clear, conscious commitment to deliberately establishing just 3 essential non-negotiable disciplines, resolving to begin executing them tomorrow morning without fail? Will you make a solemn promise to yourself to protect those carefully chosen rituals with the same fierce, unwavering vigilance you would instinctively use to guard your most valuable, irreplaceable physical possession? Remember this timeless truth: genuine greatness, lasting impact. Significant achievement never reliably emerges from sporadic bursts of intense, inconsistent effort or fleeting inspiration. Instead, it is meticulously forged one day at a time from consistent, principled action, performed with profound, unwavering commitment to the chosen path. The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that systematically, resolutely refuses to negotiate with its own internal weakness, its own impulses to surrender. It is the embodied, formidable iron will of relentless persistence. The third pillar, a testament to resilience, an unyielding persistence. Something profound and undeniable distinguishes those select few who merely idly dream of success from those remarkable individuals who actively and consistently transform those very dreams into tangible, undeniable reality. It is an unyielding, deeply embedded persistence. It is a steadfast internal quality that flatly refuses to contemplate, acknowledge, or allow surrender. Regardless of how challenging the immediate circumstances may become, or how compelling the external reasons to quit might appear. Consider for a moment any single achievement of genuine significance, of profound impact woven throughout the vast tapestry of human history, be it scientific, artistic, political, or social. Beneath the visible surface, behind the public acclaim, there invariably lies a hidden, unseen foundation, meticulously built from countless, often brutal rejections, profound failures, and devastating setbacks. These are the very experiences that would have definitively crushed, annihilated, and utterly destroyed someone possessing only ordinary levels of determination or common emotional fortitude. This profound, often unnerving capacity to continue deliberately moving forward, taking successive steps despite overwhelming, disheartening evidence, suggesting that defeat is imminent, unavoidable, or final, creates a palpable presence and aura that genuinely and unsettlingly terrifies external opposition and internal doubt alike. When external challenges or competing individuals recognize deep down with an unsettling certainty that nothing they deploy will definitively stop your measured, persistent advance, not immediate rejection, not perceived failure, not the sheer passage of time itself wearing others down, they confront the unnerving reality of an apparently unstoppable force. This realization itself can be a powerful psychological weapon disarming opposition simply through its quiet inevitability. Why does this deeply ingrained, persistent mindset so powerfully separate extraordinary, world-altering achievers from virtually everyone else? Because the vast majority of individuals mistakenly, often tragically interpret isolated failure, a temporary setback, as a definitive endpoint, the final chapter, rather than accurately recognizing it as a necessary integral component, a mandatory stepping stone on the complex pathway towards eventual, inevitable success. They consistently, reliably surrender and halt their efforts precisely at the point, the psychological threshold, where genuine breakthrough, significant momentum, or ultimate victory hovers tantalizingly just beyond their current limited field of sight. Diligently study any significant accomplishment, analyze any lasting legacy, and you will invariably uncover this same fundamental, repeating truth echoing across time and context. Genuine, hard-won success generally arrives exactly one solitary, persistent step beyond the precise point where the overwhelming majority of other people, weary and disheartened, ultimately choose to quit their efforts. Those select individuals who consciously internalize this profound, often counterintuitive wisdom and structure their mental landscape around it begin to develop a remarkable immunity, a psychological resilience against pervasive discouragement. This resilience is often profoundly mystifying to average external observers who lack the internal framework to comprehend such continued effort in the face of difficulty. Their unyielding, steady resilience creates an internal and external aura of inevitability, a quiet certainty that their goal will eventually be achieved regardless of transient difficulty. It is this inherent certainty of destination that opponents sensing their own wavering commitment often find most profoundly unsettling and disheartening to face. How then does a dedicated individual actively cultivate this rare level of truly unbreakable persistence? Begin the fundamental work by systematically reframing every perceived failure, every painful rejection, every significant setback, not as a personal indictment or an inherent indictment of your capability, but as invaluable objective data. Shift your perspective. When challenging obstacles invariably appear as they will, instead of collapsing into self-pity or frustration, immediately cultivate the habit of asking with genuine curiosity, what precise lesson, what critical piece of information, what tactical insight must I extract from this specific experience, this particular resistance? This question directs energy towards learning, not dwelling in negativity. Next, develop and strengthen what professional psychologists term your explanatory style, the specific internal narrative you construct and tell yourself following setbacks or disappointing outcomes. When encountering failure, instead of globalizing it into a sweeping statement, "I always fail at everything," or "I'm fundamentally not good enough," make a conscious, deliberate effort to isolate its cause specifically to the situation, context, or method used. This particular approach didn't yield the desired result in this situation. instead of perceiving failures or setbacks as possessing absolute permanence. This will never work, or things will always be this hard. Deliberately recognize and focus on their clear temporality. This is a temporary setback, a phase, not a final state. This crucial cognitive restructuring process doesn't remove the feeling of disappointment, but it actively transforms it, redirecting its energy from being a crushing, demotivating weight into becoming valuable strategic intelligence that informs your next steps. Recall the historical narrative of Margaret Sullivan, an individual who dramatically revolutionized American healthcare systems. She achieved this monumental feat despite the initial disheartening reality of being rejected by no fewer than 17 consecutive hospital boards, each representing a significant potential opportunity lost. When finally questioned late in her illustrious career about the seemingly inexplicable source of her extraordinary sustained persistence in the face of such overwhelming initial resistance, Sullivan revealed a disciplined core practice. She meticulously maintained a detailed rejection journal. In this journal, she specifically documented every single objection, every stated reason for refusal, every point of resistance encountered during those initial difficult years. Each single "no" I received, she explained with calm clarity, provided another essential piece of crucial information. It was data specifically regarding the precise resistance points that required systematic addressing and overcoming. She fundamentally reframed the painful experience. Those numerous rejections were not personal insults to me, she emphasized, but rather genuinely invaluable market research. 2 decades after starting her difficult journey, her transformative methodology had fundamentally reshaped and streamlined administrative systems in well over 40% of major metropolitan hospitals nationwide. That was the compounded eventual yield of treating no's as data points rather than stop signs. Are you currently right now permitting temporary, often transient setbacks to define your permanent, immutable identity, allowing a fleeting outcome to dictate your self-worth or potential? Have you perhaps confused normal expected resistance, a universal component of challenging endeavors, with incontrovertible evidence of fundamental impossibility? What undiscovered breakthrough? What extraordinary level of achievement is waiting patiently for you just beyond your current, perhaps self-imposed threshold for enduring and learning from disappointment? When your conscious commitment to persistence becomes deeply embedded and genuinely unbreakable, something quite fascinating begins to unfold in the external world around you. People's responses towards you tangibly shift. They react with either profound, genuine respect for your internal fortitude or a noticeable, perhaps uncomfortable sense of unease and discomfort. Your steadfast, undeniable refusal to accept conventional limitation as an endpoint implicitly challenges their own established comfort zones and their own self-defined surrender points. The majority of individuals unconsciously or perhaps semi-consciously construct elaborate, comforting justifications for abandoning difficult, prolonged pursuits, crafting internally a reassuring illusion that genuine success was inherently impossible from the outset, rather than truthfully acknowledging the far simpler reality that it merely demanded an extraordinary sustained degree of raw persistence that they were unwilling or unable to provide. Your visible continued advance navigating and often overcoming identical obstacles that caused others to quit systematically dismantles their protective internal narrative, making their rationalizations appear weaker in contrast. Remember this crucial distinction: persistence does not necessitate blindly repeating ineffective failed approaches in a repetitive, unthinking loop. Rather, true effective persistence means fundamentally maintaining your unwavering commitment and crystal clear vision to your desired ultimate destination or objective, while simultaneously, continuously, and intelligently adjusting your specific route, your tactics, and your methods based on the feedback and lessons learned from encountered resistance and perceived setbacks. Thomas Edison's renowned 10,000 recorded unsuccessful attempts to create a practical incandescent light bulb were not fundamentally failures in his mind. They were, in his perspective, essential informative steps that systematically illuminated and eliminated the specific materials and designs that simply would not work. His resilient mind did not become weaker with each apparent setback or disappointing outcome. It grew exponentially stronger, wiser, and more strategically informed with each data point gathered, eventually developing a profound resilience and capacity for experimentation that significantly transcended typical human limitations. Will you make a binding internal commitment to deliberately persisting through your very next 10 significant rejections or perceived failures, learning from each one without allowing yourself to surrender or significantly compromise your core vision? Can you fundamentally transform the experience of disappointment from a state of crushing emotional devastation into a source of clear, actionable strategic intelligence that propels you forward? The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that steadfastly, consistently, and strategically treats all encountered obstacles as fundamentally nothing more than information valuable, illuminating data points, carefully gathered feedback specifically designed to guide necessary adjustments and refinements, rather than being misinterpreted as definitive signals to definitively surrender or abandon the path. It is the mind that inherently trusts the process of evolution through challenge. The fourth pillar, building upon collaborative strength, harnessing the mastermind principle. Throughout the rich tapestry of human achievement, something profoundly distinct consistently separates those capable individuals who attain only modest, localized success from those visionary leaders who actively and intentionally transform entire industries, reshape the course of nations, or profoundly innovate artistic domains. It is not just individual brilliance, it is their demonstrated ability to systematically harness and synthesize collective intelligence, the combined mental power of multiple minds, through the strategic formation and management of strategic alliances. They recognize that true monumental leaps rarely occur in intellectual isolation. Consider realistically the fundamental inherent limitation residing within even the single most brilliant, gifted, and powerful human mind standing alone. It is the constraint of its solitary perspective. No single individual, regardless of their towering genius, their vast experience, or their exceptional processing power, can simultaneously perceive every potential possibility within a complex system, reliably identify every hidden opportunity embedded within a challenging landscape, or systematically overcome every conceivable obstacle through their isolated solitary thinking alone. The field of view is simply too limited for one entity. Those astute individuals who keenly recognize this inherent truth and act upon it, who strategically, deliberately, and consistently unite complementary intellects, assembling diverse cognitive strengths, do not just achieve additive results. 1 + 1 = 2, they consistently generate exponential outcomes. 1 + 1 = 2, perhaps even 1 + 1 = 100. This remarkable synergistic capacity to consciously orchestrate the blending and magnification of mental synergy produces results that genuinely and understandably terrify, puzzle, and disarm conventional thinkers, those accustomed to competing only against isolated individuals. Why does this collaborative mastermind principle, when correctly and consistently applied reliably, generate such an extraordinary asymmetric advantage in the face of competition or complex problems? Because when a select group of distinct minds actively unite in perfect intentional harmony, sharing a common, clearly defined purpose, respecting their inherent differences, and working together systematically towards a shared objective, something greater than the sum of its parts truly emerges, a form of collective intelligence that extends powerfully beyond the mere accumulation or sum of individual contributions. This collective intelligence can navigate complexity and identify solutions that were simply invisible to any single member working alone. Look carefully and analytically at virtually any revolutionary breakthrough, any paradigm-shifting innovation across any field: science, business, art, politics, and you will reliably discover this same repeating pattern. Fundamental, widespread transformation rarely, if ever, emerges spontaneously or exclusively from solitary genius toiling alone in a vacuum. Instead, it is almost universally forged and ignited through the creative combustion, the fertile interaction, the dynamic cross-pollination of fundamentally diverse perspectives, different viewpoints, and varied skill sets, all intently focused and rigorously applied to navigating complex challenges and achieving compelling shared objectives. Those masters who internalize and effectively implement this mastermind principle effectively multiply, sometimes dramatically, their fundamental mental capability, their problem-solving capacity, and their speed of innovation. They are competing as a powerful unified front while their competitors, locked in traditional individualistic thinking, remain inherently constrained by the inherent rigid limits of isolated individual perspective and capability. It's like one side bringing a synchronized team to a challenge while the other brings only individual contenders. How precisely does one effectively and strategically implement this transformative approach to collaborative thinking? Begin the process by conducting a deeply honest, clear-eyed inventory of your own core. Intellectual and experiential strengths, the areas where your thinking is naturally strong, insightful, and effective. Crucially, pair this self-assessment with an equally honest inventory of your corresponding cognitive weaknesses, the areas where your thinking may be constrained, blind-spotted, or less effective standing alone. Identify with ruthless precision. Precisely where your current thinking most requires complementary perspectives, where adding diverse viewpoints would add the most value. Next, embark on a deliberate, proactive search for individuals whose cognitive strengths directly and strategically align with your identified deficiencies. People who think differently, possess different knowledge bases, or approach problems from fundamentally distinct angles. This isn't just networking, it is strategic recruitment of cognitive power. Crucially, ensure this relationship is built on reciprocity. Seek individuals to whom you can also offer substantial value through your own distinct expertise and perspective. True mastermind requires mutual contribution. However, simply associating casually with intellectually diverse individuals, having them merely in your network, proves insufficient to harness this exponential power. You must consciously establish operational harmony and productive synergy. This is built through a clear articulation of a shared compelling purpose that resonates with all members, a foundation of profound mutual respect for each other's unique contributions and perspectives, and a commitment to systematic structured collaboration, not just informal brainstorming sessions. Regularly schedule dedicated focused mastermind sessions with clearly defined objectives for each meeting, specific problems to solve, opportunities to explore, strategies to refine. Establish structured discussion protocols to ensure equitable contribution from all members, active and respectful discourse even when disagreements arise, and a systematic, actionable process for implementing the emergent insights and collective decisions reached. This isn't therapy, it's intellectual teamwork operating at a high level. Consider the case of Alexander Westbrook, an individual widely credited with fundamentally transforming Australia's challenging and often precarious agricultural sector during a period of significant environmental and economic hardship. Rather than attempting the monumental task of isolated innovation from his single perspective, Westbrook consciously and strategically assembled monthly symposiums. These regular gatherings brought together a highly diverse group of intellects: expert meteorologists understanding weather patterns, soil scientists understanding the earth equipment, engineers understanding the tools, distribution specialists understanding logistics, and economic forecasters understanding markets and finances. He put all these different filters in the same room to look at the same problem. Each single participant, he later explained to bewildered colleagues, viewed the identical set of challenges, drought, pests, market shifts, through entirely different expert perceptual frameworks and disciplinary lenses. He fostered an environment where these different perspectives could interact constructively. He discovered that the most impactful breakthrough solutions consistently emerged not from the isolated brilliance of any single individual expert operating in their silo, but specifically from the dynamic collision and creative synthesis between these profoundly diverse viewpoints systematically focused on common problems. Within a mere 5 years of consistently implementing his structured collaborative mastermind methodology, the national production yields for critical crops throughout Australia increased by an astounding 73%. This was achieved despite the region simultaneously enduring the worst and most prolonged drought cycle recorded in history during that exact period. This result was fundamentally impossible through any single individual's effort or expertise. It was the direct outcome of harnessing collective intelligence through strategic alliance. Are you currently attempting to navigate complex, multifaceted achievements through isolated solitary thinking, limiting your cognitive power to the confines of one mind? Have you perhaps fundamentally mistaken independence working alone for inherent strength, rather than truthfully recognizing that strategic, interdependent collaboration with diverse minds offers a compounding, multiplicative cognitive advantage? What untapped potential! What groundbreaking possibilities! What elegant solutions remain utterly invisible and unrealized simply due to the inherent limitations of your own single unsupplemented perspective? When you consciously, successfully, and consistently harness the dynamic power of mastermind collaboration, activating the synergistic intelligence of a united group of diverse minds, something profoundly remarkable and often unsettling to others will happen. Your conventional competitors still operating in silos become genuinely disturbed, confused, and even implicitly intimidated by your visibly accelerated progress, your seemingly effortless navigation of complexity. They observe your organization or your initiative systematically solving entrenched difficult problems with uncanny rapid efficiency and innovative insight, while they themselves remain visibly trapped within the inherent limitations and blind spots of singular isolated viewpoint constraints. They can't figure out how you are moving so fast and seeing things they don't. Most individuals perhaps unconsciously operate from a place of ego protection, a subtle internal resistance that makes them wary of genuinely seeking and integrating external input from others. They may subtly or overtly interpret deep, necessary collaboration as an implicit admission of personal inadequacy, rather than accurately seeing it as a powerful strategic amplification of their own inherent strengths and a mitigation of their weaknesses. Your courageous willingness to actively solicit, integrate, and strategically synthesize genuinely diverse perspectives to sit with minds that challenge your own assumptions creates a tangible operational velocity, a speed of adaptation and problem-solving that those limited by isolated thinking perceive as almost supernatural, impossibly fast. Remember, however, that genuinely effective mastermind implementation, this harnessing of collective intelligence, requires careful, deliberate participant selection. Do not simply gather anyone available. Actively seek out individuals who not only demonstrate intellectual excellence and possess truly relevant, diverse expertise, but who also embody a genuine altruistic desire for mutual success and shared growth, not just personal gain within the group. Actively avoid personality conflicts that tend to generate destructive friction or ego battles rather than the intended creative spark and productive synergy. Furthermore, establish crystal-clear operational guidelines from the outset for your mastermind sessions, ensuring fundamentally balanced contribution from all members, promoting respectful and constructive discourse, even during moments of sharp disagreement, and requiring systematic implementation and follow-through on the emergent insights and actionable decisions that arise from the collaborative discussions. The mastermind represents not casual association, superficial networking, or intermittent chat sessions, but rather a dedicated, high-functioning strategic alliance specifically formed and consistently nurtured towards the explicit goal of achieving extraordinary, otherwise impossible results. Can you in the coming week identify just 3 specific individuals whose core mental strengths, knowledge bases, or perspectives would genuinely and significantly complement your identified cognitive limitations and challenges? Will you take the deliberate step to initiate the formation of a structured mastermind group? With these individuals articulating a clear, compelling shared purpose, outlining a systematic operational process for your interactions, and ensuring mutual advantage and value creation for all involved. The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that strategically transcends its inherent individual limitation through the conscious discipline formation and leveraging of strategic intellectual alliances, conquering the isolation of solo thinking through deliberate, empowered collaboration. The 5th pillar, addressing an ancient adversary, conquering fear through deliberate action. Something profound and undeniably distinct consistently separates those select individuals who reach genuine heights of greatness, those whose actions and achievements echo across time, from the vast majority who merely spend their time contemplating that potential greatness frozen by internal resistance. This separator is their fundamental cultivated relationship with fear. Consider deeply what truly differentiates legendary figures, those historical giants whose courage and action changed the course of events, from ordinary individuals often sharing identical daunting circumstances and external pressures. Is it, as many might intuitively assume, a complete absence of fear within their inner landscape? Absolutely and emphatically not. Those who accomplish extraordinary courage requiring feats, whether in battle, business, art, or social reform, experience the identical, raw, visceral, emotional responses to threat, risk, and uncertainty as virtually everyone else on the planet. Their pulse quickens, their palms sweat, their minds race with potential negative outcomes. The fundamental distinguishing quality, the core separator, lies not in the presence of fear, but specifically in their behavioral response to that fear. They make a conscious, disciplined choice to move directly toward, rather than instinctively recoil and flee, away from, whatever creates the significant discomfort, whatever triggers the internal resistance. This conscious, often counterintuitive approach of leaning into discomfort and moving towards perceived threats paradoxically systematically builds psychological immunity and profound internal resilience. This cultivated fearlessness in action appears from the outside almost superhuman or preternaturally brave to conventional observers who are dominated by their own fear-driven avoidance patterns. Why does this methodical approach, this deliberate strategy of exposure and movement towards discomfort, reliably create such a profound asymmetric psychological and practical advantage? Because at its core, fear represents fundamentally nothing more and nothing less than unmastered territory, both externally in the world and perhaps more crucially internally within your psychological landscape. It is psychological terrain that your mind, through lack of prior experience, exposure, or successful navigation, hasn't yet systematically mapped, understood, and functionally conquered. Every single capability you currently possess, every skill you fluidly execute, every task you comfortably perform, originally began as an unfamiliar, often daunting activity that triggered some degree of internal discomfort, anxiety, or outright fear in its nascent stages. Those individuals who consciously, systematically, and deliberately expand the boundaries of their existing comfort zones, those venturing deliberately into areas that cause internal friction through the intentional pursuit of productive discomfort, radically accelerate their own personal evolution and expand their sphere of competence and influence. Conversely, the vast majority who prioritize comfort and systematically avoid psychological friction remain permanently confined and limited within the narrow boundaries of their current capabilities and their own self-imposed limitations, bound by the internal maps they have refused to update. When an external observer perceives and recognizes an individual who consistently, reliably moves toward difficulty, challenge, or perceived risk, leaning into the storm, rather than instinctively or automatically recoiling and retreating away from it, it generates a powerful, often unnerving presence. This presence genuinely intimidates through its sheer, apparent, active fearlessness, an appearance that comes from acting despite fear, not in its absence. How then does one methodically implement this transformative approach of converting fear into fuel for progress? Begin the conscious process by creating a detailed inventory of your current fear landscape, diligently listing all the activities, social situations, challenging conversations, or potential actions that genuinely trigger significant internal discomfort, anxiety, or strong psychological resistance within you. Be specific and honest. Once documented, objectively rank these items from least to most moderate psychological resistance all the way up to severe debilitating resistance. This creates a map of your unmastered internal territory. Next, design and establish a progressive exposure protocol, a systematic plan for gradual engagement. Begin deliberately with manageable lower-level challenges on your list, those generating only moderate or mild anxiety. Commit to successfully navigating these. Once a degree of comfort is achieved, or the associated anxiety diminishes through repeated exposure, systematically advance to the next level, tackling activities higher on your list involving greater resistance. This is gradual desensitization through controlled experience. Make a conscious daily non-negotiable commitment to completing at least one identified fear-inducing action, even a small one every single day. Fundamentally, understand at a core level, that the primary profound psychological benefit of this practice emerges not solely from the successful outcome of the action, though that's a bonus, but axiomatically from the courageous act of undertaking the action, itself deliberately stepping into the discomfort despite the resistance. Document each experience meticulously. Record the specific situation, the level of anticipatory anxiety experienced before the action, and crucially, the level of actual discomfort experienced during and after the action. Consistently notice and internalize the common pattern you will find. The anticipatory anxiety preceding the action almost invariably significantly exceeds the level of actual discomfort experienced while performing the action itself. This recurring empirical evidence systematically reprograms your brain's threat detection system, teaching it through experience that feared situations are less dangerous in reality than in anxious imagination. Consider the compelling case of Victoria Pemberton, an individual who ascended to profoundly transform the intricate, often volatile field of British telecommunications, an arena demanding immense confidence and strategic negotiation. Remarkably, she began her professional journey having previously struggled intensely with debilitating social anxiety, a condition that made even simple interactions difficult. When questioned about her extraordinary, almost meteoric rise from a quiet back-office analyst position to becoming a commanding industry pioneer, Pemberton revealed a structured internal system she meticulously employed, what she termed her discomfort curriculum. These were deliberate, systematic weekly experiences, she explained, specifically and intentionally designed to deliberately expand my core psychological capability and resilience. She continued, every single Thursday afternoon for an unbroken period of 5 consecutive years, I rigorously scheduled precisely that specific activity that terrified me most that week. She systematically forced herself to face the apex of her weekly fear list, which progressively included demanding public presentations to large audiences, navigating confrontational high-stakes negotiations, and engaging with challenging, unpredictable media interviews. By advancing deliberately and systematically through this progressive curriculum of calibrated challenge and exposure, this methodical, relentless expansion of her psychological comfort zone, she forged a profound, deep-seated leadership capacity, a palpable internal strength that many competitors in her field found genuinely intimidating and difficult to counter. It was not innate fearlessness, but deliberately built resilience. It was the capacity to function optimally in situations that would paralyze others. Are you currently in your life or career consistently avoiding experiences, critical conversations, demanding projects, uncomfortable feedback, public visibility that are objectively essential for your necessary growth and expansion? Have you perhaps subtly or overtly fundamentally mistaken temporary survivable discomfort, the natural signal of growth and change, for genuine existential danger? Do you recognize that the presence of fear in undertaking something new is often not a warning to retreat, but precisely a key indicator that you are on the threshold of expanding your capabilities, a signal that this activity resides within your necessary growth zone? What extraordinary unrealized capabilities, what dimensions of influence, what levels of performance remain dormant, untapped, or permanently hidden behind your established ingrained patterns of avoidance and psychological self-protection? When you consistently, consciously, and relentlessly make the deliberate choice to move toward fear, towards discomfort, towards challenge, rather than automatically, instinctively recoiling and moving away from it, something profoundly fascinating and empowering occurs internally. The sheer psychological resistance preceding the action, that feeling of dread, the urge to retreat significantly, diminishes, softening over time through consistent, repeated exposure and successful navigation. Each time you deliberately engage with a fear-triggering experience and successfully navigate it, even if imperfectly, your mind gathers crucial empirical evidence. This experience, this proof of survival and capability, despite the discomfort, systematically desensitizes you and positively reconditions your neurological threat detection system. It's teaching your ancient brain, see, we did it and we're okay. We are more capable than we thought. Conversely, the vast majority of individuals unconsciously or deliberately construct elaborate, highly sophisticated avoidance mechanisms. They invest immense energy in navigating around fear, diligently preserving their state of temporary fleeting comfort, while tragically often unknowingly sacrificing their significant long-term potential and capability development on the altar of that short-term ease. Your demonstrated conscious willingness to embrace short-term psychological and emotional discomfort in service of long-term capability expansion, resilience, and influence creates an accelerated trajectory of personal evolution, a speed of growth that conventional thinkers, those steeped in comfort, find genuinely unsettling, confusing, and often profoundly intimidating. They cannot fathom why you would willingly walk into the very situations they go to such lengths to avoid. Remember this fundamental truth about courage. True psychological strength and courage never authentically emerge from a convenient absence of emotional fear. Rather, it is forged directly from the deliberate practice of behavioral persistence and determined action, explicitly performed despite the palpable presence of emotional resistance, regardless of how loud that internal warning signal might scream. Genuine psychological strength, the kind that manifests as inner resilience and external fearlessness, develops not through the strategy of passively avoiding internal or external triggers for anxiety, but fundamentally through a systematic process of conscious desensitization. This desensitization is achieved specifically through deliberate, repeated exposure to those triggers in a controlled, progressive manner. Each successive fear-inducing experience that you intentionally step into and successfully navigate, defining success not as a perfect outcome, but as the act of engaging with the challenge, provides concrete neurological evidence to your brain, empirically expanding your perception of your own actual capabilities and bandwidth. This accumulating body of evidence, layer upon layer, brick upon brick, eventually, gradually, profoundly transforms your fundamental core identity, transitioning you from being someone primarily defined by avoiding perceived threats and challenges into someone who is visibly energized, empowered, and actively engaged by those very same challenges. Will you, within the next few days, make a binding personal commitment to specifically identify at least 3 distinct tangible fears that you know deep down are currently actively limiting your growth, your potential, or your sphere of action? Having identified them, can you resolve to design and establish a deliberate progressive exposure protocol, a systematic plan to actively and consistently confront each identified limitation, starting small and gradually increasing the intensity? The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that courageously interprets the internal signal of fear, not as an automatic commanding warning to immediately retreat to safety, but rather as a clear strategic invitation to deliberately advance. It is the mind that consistently and intentionally moves toward rather than away from psychological resistance and the boundaries of discomfort. The 6th pillar often overlooked the strategic power of silence within our constantly chattering world. Something truly remarkable and often intuitively baffling fundamentally distinguishes those individuals who reliably command genuine earned respect and attention from the majority who merely passively seek or loudly demand it. It is their cultivated strategic relationship with silence. In a world saturated with incessant noise, both external environmental noise and the internal psychological chatter amplified by constant communication streams, those who wield silence deliberately possess a hidden advantage. Consider deeply what tangible quality differentiates individuals who consistently and powerfully influence others, moving minds, shifting opinions, driving change, from the vast multitudes who simply make noise, adding to the pervasive background clamor without creating significant impact. Is it primarily eloquent articulation, compelling natural charisma, or simply speaking with the loudest volume or most frequency? Know while these factors can occasionally amplify a message, they are fundamentally secondary characteristics, superficial tools that can be effectively wielded only when supported by a deeper structure. At its absolute core stands the profoundly disciplined power of intentional silence, that consciously created space between thoughts, between uttered words, between reactive impulses, where true wisdom has the opportunity to emerge, where clarity can crystallize, and where genuine inner strength most effectively and compellingly reveals itself, not through assertive declaration, but through grounded, self-possessed presence. Why then does this seemingly passive quality of deliberate restraint, the conscious choice not to speak or fill the space, generate such profound and tangible strategic advantage? Because in a society fundamentally addicted to immediate, often unfiltered external expression, a culture that frequently equates being quiet with having nothing worthwhile to contribute, those select few individuals who consciously and deliberately master the art of selective silence develop extraordinary, finely tuned observational intelligence, while others are frantically, often impulsively broadcasting half-formed opinions, raw reactions, and unvetted ideas. The strategically silent individual is actively, intently absorbing crucial nuances, processing subtle information, identifying underlying patterns invisible to those preoccupied with speaking, and then, and only then, choosing to speak only when genuine, meaningful, and valuable insight can be authentically added to the collective understanding or forward movement. This cultivated deliberate restraint in communication creates a palpable, often unnerving presence, a gravitas. Their eventual words, when they are finally delivered, carry an unmistakable weight, a profound impact, a depth of consideration, precisely because they are perceived both consciously and unconsciously by listeners as emerging from a process of careful consideration, intentional observation, and strategic deliberation, rather than simply being a knee-jerk, impulsive reaction to fill a void. The very act of their listening and waiting elevates the significance of their eventual contribution. How then does one actively and consciously cultivate this formidable mental and communication discipline? Begin by rigorously implementing a fundamental governing rule for your interactions. Make a conscious decision to never speak simply for the sole purpose of passively filling an existing silence or conversational pause. When a conversation naturally pauses, creating an open space, actively resist the ingrained societal programming amplified by digital habits that instinctively demands the immediate introduction of sound of more words to banish discomfort. Instead, deliberately become comfortable sitting within that open, silent space, recognizing it not as an awkward void, but as a valuable opportunity for deeper observation, richer internal processing, and a chance for others perhaps less comfortable with silence to reveal more. Next, establish internal personal response protocols. Before spontaneously speaking or offering your thoughts in any given interaction, deliberately evaluate mentally in the brief internal moment you have cultivated whether your intended contribution, authentically, improves upon the silence already present in the space. Force yourself to ask introspective, critical questions. Does this addition of my voice genuinely add meaningful value? Have I paused sufficiently to fully consider alternative perspectives or implications? What more might I potentially learn by deliberately choosing to listen longer, absorbing further information before formulating my response? This conscious, disciplined internal filtering process fundamentally transforms casual, often reactive communication into strategic, intentional communication, yielding significant tactical advantage in negotiation, leadership, and influence. Consider the impactful case of Rajiv Chandrasekhar, an international diplomat renowned and often feared for what was universally referred to as his legendary contemplative pause. While navigating critical complex trade agreements between competing Asian nation scenarios fraught with tension and aggressive posturing, Chandrasekhar would frequently, after the opposing representatives finished their extensive declarations and demands, remain completely silent for prolonged periods, sometimes as long as 45 seconds of duration, that felt exceptionally long and uncomfortable in a high-stakes negotiation room. The strategic void created by his intentional lengthy silence created something quite remarkable, a colleague later revealed in an interview. The adversarial representatives, profoundly uncomfortable with the sustained lack of sound and needing to fill the perceived vacuum, would invariably become visibly agitated and feel compelled to continue speaking. Driven by discomfort, they would often nervously add qualifiers, offer unnecessary explanations, or crucially unintentionally reveal critical pieces of sensitive information, hidden motivations, or negotiation weak points they had initially fully intended to withhold and keep confidential. This methodical, disciplined restraint, this strategic deployment of intentional silence, ultimately secured significant economic concessions and favorable terms that his competitors had previously and adamantly declared were absolutely non-negotiable thresholds. His power came not from what he said, but from the calculated moments he chose not to speak. Are you currently perhaps unknowingly diminishing your own potential influence? Your personal gravitas through a habit of impulsive, reactive, or simply verbose expression, speaking just to be heard, rather than to contribute meaningfully. Have you mistakenly confused the sheer quantity of words spoken, the sheer volume of your verbal output, with the authentic quality or impact of your contribution? What strategic advantages, what deeper insights, what greater leverage await you when you make the conscious disciplined choice to deliberately release the ingrained psychological compulsion to automatically fill every conversational space, every momentary pause with immediate sound or unvetted thoughts. When your conscious relationship with silence becomes fundamentally strategic, a deliberately chosen tool, rather than merely being a state you perceive as uncomfortable and awkward, to be quickly avoided, something profound and genuinely fascinating occurs in your external interactions. Others listening to you begin to unconsciously or consciously associate your deliberate chosen words with an uncommon level of significance, with depth and insight. They intuitively recognize, without being consciously told, the palpable weight of deliberate consideration and careful internal processing that reliably precedes your eventual expression. They sense that when you speak, it truly matters. The vast majority of individuals consistently speak from a place of immediate reactive impulse, broadcasting nascent thoughts the very moment they form in their minds, without allowing for sufficient internal maturation, critical filtering, or strategic refinement. Your conscious intentional restraint, your deliberate cultivation of moments of silence before response, creates a quality of communication that visibly and audibly emerges not from fleeting emotional reaction or a need for attention, but consistently from a place of comprehensive perspective, strategic processing, and cultivated insight. This difference generates a powerful gravitas, a profound sense of grounded presence that makes your words resonate. This quiet power is something conventional reactive communicators, those lacking internal discipline, find genuinely unsettling, puzzling, and difficult to navigate against. Remember this essential clarification: strategic silence masterfully employed does not signify a permanent passive withdrawal from interaction or a refusal to communicate. Instead, it represents a conscious, disciplined commitment to selective contribution, to speaking only when doing so adds authentic value that silence alone cannot provide. The ultimate goal is not to become uncommunicative or aloof, but rather to become extraordinarily intentional, impactful, and discerning with every word you choose to utter. Study diligently those rare, impactful individuals whose spoken words seem to carry an unmistakable inherent weight that silences rooms and shifts perspectives. You will invariably discover that their minds operate differently. They speak not from a compulsive need to be heard or a discomfort with quiet, but specifically from a deep well of carefully cultivated insight and strategically processed understanding. Their practiced restraint fundamentally creates vast mental space, fertile ground, between the noise where profound wisdom genuinely flourishes and condenses, while distracting impulsivity and unvetted reaction systematically wither and lose their power. Will you make a specific commitment to implementing the practice of strategic silence, pausing, deliberately evaluating internally within your next 3 significantly important conversations, consciously resisting the ingrained urge to immediately fill perceived voids? Can you resolve to actively push back against the pervasive societal and digital pressure that subtly, constantly demands immediate, often unfiltered external expression and constant vocal presence? The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that chooses to speak not from neurological impulse or neurotic compulsion, but specifically from deliberate strategic intention, delivering its chosen words with authentic weight, substance, and profound meaning, rather than merely filling the surrounding space with ephemeral sound lacking real depth. The 7th pillar: carving order from chaos, the discipline of singular focus. Throughout the remarkable span of human achievement across all fields, something fundamentally profound and undeniable consistently separates those individuals who attain truly extraordinary, impactful results from those who remain perpetually busy, caught in a flurry of activity, yet seem to produce only minimal, unremarkable output. It is their cultivated internal relationship with the application of attention. Consider deeply what tangible quality clearly distinguishes individuals who actively transform entire industries, relentlessly create genuinely revolutionary innovations that redefine categories or attain absolute unparalleled mastery within complex, demanding domains. Is it always a superior raw intelligence quotient? Is it merely working significantly more total hours than everyone else? Is it simply having privileged access to greater resources, more capital, more contacts? While these external factors can undeniably contribute to the process and potentially amplify existing capabilities beneath them, as a foundational enabler lies something far more fundamental, far more internally cultivated. It is the unwavering, disciplined capacity for sustained, deep and fundamentally uninterrupted focus, the ability to direct one's cognitive resources like a laser beam, channeled exclusively and intensely toward clear, defined, singular objectives. This internal mental discipline, this power of concentrated attention, systematically generates an unstoppable momentum, a forward-driving force that those with scattered, fragmented minds find absolutely baffling, utterly confusing, and deeply frustrating in contrast to their own diffused efforts. Why does this intensely concentrated, singularly focused approach reliably generate such a powerful and asymmetric advantage in productivity and output? Because in a profound, often underappreciated sense, genuine conscious attention represents the ultimate non-renewable resource. Unlike money, which can be earned or acquired, time, which can be managed though never truly reclaimed, once spent attention, once scattered, cannot be gathered and reapplied to the exact same level of efficacy in a linear way. It leaks. Where concentrated, deliberate focus authentically flows, tangible, impactful results inevitably, predictably follow. It is an iron law of productivity. Conversely, those individuals who chronically scatter their precious finite mental energy across a multitude, countless disparate initiatives, various competing projects, an endless stream of reactive tasks, advance each of those things only minimally, a fraction of an inch at a time, diluting their impact across a broad, shallow surface. While those select individuals who consciously and relentlessly channel that same total quantity of effort, that identical finite resource directly and intensely toward one or a small handful of clear, singularly defined, high-leverage objectives, create profound exponential progress, accelerating dramatically forward through the sheer power of cumulative momentum, deep expertise development, and profound immersion. When an external observer perceives and witnesses an individual whose intentional concentrated attention appears utterly unused, impervious to the relentless barrage of endless external distractions, alerts and demands vying for psychological real estate, it creates a tangible presence. This presence is not necessarily loud or ostentatious, but it is profoundly, genuinely intimidating through its sheer intensity, its undeniable self-control, and its visibly unwavering purpose. How precisely does one consciously cultivate and fortify this formidable level of concentrated mental power, this capacity for deep, focused work? Begin the practice by internalizing and acting upon a fundamental, non-negotiable truth about modern cognitive function. Multitasking, far from being a desirable badge of productivity or efficiency in a complex world, in fact represents a systematic, efficiency-destroying form of fundamental cognitive ineffectiveness. The cumulative body of rigorous neurological research has consistently proven conclusively and without ambiguity that the very act of rapidly switching attention back and forth between disparate tasks, the core of multitasking, significantly destroys meaningful productivity, inhibits deep thought, and creates little more than an unreliable illusion of real accomplishment and progress. It breeds shallowness and error. Actively implement a rigorous time-blocking methodology in your daily schedule. Deliberately allocate and protect large, uninterrupted periods of focused time specifically and exclusively dedicated to working intensely on your single most significant high-leverage objective, with all non-essential communication devices, notifications, and potential interruptions actively disabled. Start this practice with manageable, shorter duration focused blocks, perhaps 30 minutes to begin with, and gradually systematically work to extend these into longer, more sustained deep work sessions, aiming for durations of 90 minutes or even longer over time once your focus muscle strengthens. During these protected periods of deep work, deliberately cultivate an almost religious intolerance for any form of interruption, be it a ping from an email, a colleague's casual question, or an internal urge to check social media. Treat the deliberate direction and preservation of your precious finite attention resource as profoundly sacred territory, a vital limited commodity that requires fierce, relentless protection against all incursions, both internal and external. This deliberate protection is a critical act of self-respect and strategic effectiveness. Look to the impactful case of Eliza Thornton, an individual who profoundly revolutionized the intricate landscape of American architectural design, reshaping practices, materials, and aesthetic standards, despite having entered the competitive field possessing only minimal formal educational credentials, a background many considered utterly insufficient for achieving significant impact. When questioned late in her pioneering career about the source of her extraordinary, seemingly inexplicable rise from a starting position as a humble drafting assistant to becoming a commanding innovator who influenced the entire industry, Thornton revealed a profound yet remarkably simple core practice, what she termed her sacred hours methodology. For 3 unbroken decades, she explained with unwavering certainty, "Without a single exception, regardless of my personal circumstances or external demands, I fiercely, vigilantly protected the early morning hours between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. as utterly inviolable, absolutely non-negotiable territory." She contrasted this with the habits of her peers. While my competitors regularly fragmented their attention across countless simultaneous demands, endless reactive meetings, responding to volumes of correspondence being constantly interrupted by colleagues and requests, I intentionally channeled those precious concentrated 4 hours of absolute undisturbed focus daily directly toward deep work and achieving mastery within my craft. The cumulative effect of this seemingly simple yet profoundly disciplined practice of accumulating vast hours of concentrated deep work, unchallenged by the constant fragmentation faced by her peers, ultimately generated fundamental design innovations, strategic insights, and an unparalleled depth of expertise that established entirely new standards across the entirety of the architecture industry. It was the sheer power of compounding attention over an extended period. Are you currently, perhaps without fully realizing the cost, significantly diluting and limiting your innate potential through a chronic ingrained habit of pervasive attention, fracturing, constantly switching contexts, never allowing your mind to rest and focus deeply on a single task for an extended duration? Have you perhaps unconsciously or overtly fundamentally confused the feeling of perpetual busyness, the hurried movement between many tasks, with the actual achievement of genuine productivity, creating valuable output? What extraordinary levels of development, what profound breakthroughs in your chosen domain, what truly impactful results are patiently awaiting you, are lying just within reach. Once you make the conscious decision and cultivate the discipline to channel your currently scattered mental energy, that diffused cognitive power systematically and powerfully toward a path of deep, concentrated, singular progress. When your internal capacity for maintaining sustained, uninterrupted, concentrated focus becomes visibly exceptional, a clear hallmark of your work, something remarkable and often surprising to others will happen. You will reliably and consistently accomplish in weeks what other individuals, those operating with fragmented minds, visibly struggle and often take months or even years to produce. This significantly accelerated rate of tangible progress, this disproportionate output relative to time spent, frequently appears almost supernatural, baffling, and often profoundly intimidating to conventional observers who are operating from a framework of dispersed attention. They cannot reconcile your apparent ease of progress with their own perceived difficulty. The vast majority of individuals unconsciously bounce frantically, haphazardly, and reactively between disparate tasks, responding to an endless stream of communications, being perpetually pulled in countless directions by fleeting distractions and shifting external demands. This frenetic activity often creates only the superficial illusion of perpetual motion without yielding corresponding meaningful or significant advancement towards valuable high-leverage objectives. Your conscious, cultivated, disciplined concentration, your deliberate funneling of mental energy, actively generates an internal momentum so powerful it visibly transforms previously perceived difficult, complex challenges into conquered, completed territory through the sheer, focused, unwavering force of sustained, channeled attention. Remember this crucial insight in the age of infinite digital distraction. The masterful management of your precious attention resource fundamentally supersedes and is ultimately far more critical than the mere management of your physical time when it comes to achieving genuine high-level productivity and impact. Make it a non-negotiable priority to protect your finite cognitive resources, your capacity for focused attention, with the exact same level of fierce, vigilant protection you would instinctually and justifiably use to guard your most valuable financial wealth or your physical health. Begin to consciously recognize ubiquitous interruption, a constant email ping, a social media notification, a seemingly urgent but unnecessary meeting. A wandering thought pulling you off track, not as an inevitable, unavoidable workplace reality that you must passively accept, but rather as an act of deliberate, catastrophic productivity, theft, a direct assault on your most valuable asset. Actively establish clear, robust, and firmly enforced boundaries, both externally with others and internally with your own impulses around your single most valuable professional possession, your profound capacity for delivering undivided attention, intentionally directed, relentlessly channeled towards achieving your truly significant high-leverage objectives. This fundamental internal discipline, this ability to direct and hold attention against resistance, is the core skill that ultimately distinguishes the rare ranks of extraordinary producers, those creating disproportionate value, from the vast majority of individuals who remain perpetually busy but consistently underperform relative to their innate potential. Can you in the coming day specifically identify your single most significant highest leverage objective, that one task or project that would create the most profound positive impact if brought to fruition, and consciously resolve to dedicate deep, concentrated focus upon it? Having identified it, will you make a commitment to deliberately establish sacred protected blocks of time specifically allocated for work on this objective? Resolving to guard these sessions with the intensity and sanctity of a religious ritual against all forms of interruption, both external and internal. The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that consciously, systematically, and relentlessly directs its sustained high-intensity attention and finite energy towards conquering singular, impactful objectives, achieving profound results, while the minds of others passively permit their potential to be fragmented, diffused, and diluted across an endless, ineffective landscape of constant distraction and reactivity. The eighth pillar, programming your internal compass, the art of strategic visualization. Something truly remarkable and often counterintuitive profoundly distinguishes those select individuals who reliably and consistently transform possibilities, ideas, dreams, goals into tangible, undeniable realities, from the vast majority who merely spend their time idly contemplating or hoping for those potential futures to materialize. It is their conscious, cultivated, and active relationship with the deliberate use of mental imagery. Consider deeply what palpable quality systematically separates individuals who consistently achieve their most ambitious, often challenging objectives, be they professional milestones, athletic pinnacles, or personal transformations, from other equally talented, intelligent, and potentially capable individuals who, despite effort, routinely fall short, failing to reach their intended destination. Is it simply consistently greater external effort deployed? A superior tactical strategy planned on paper, enhanced access to material resources? While these external factors certainly contribute and are often necessary ingredients for success beneath them, enabling their effective application lies something far more fundamental, far more internally cultivated. It is the disciplined, deliberate, and systematic practice of strategic visualization, the intentional creation of vivid, multisensory mental images executed with such profound clarity, detail, and emotional resonance that it literally and effectively programs the powerful subconscious mind not for merely attempting achievement, but for the near inevitable movement towards that vividly imagined outcome. This deliberate internal conditioning, this proactive programming of the deep mind, creates an internal state of profound visceral certainty, a knowing regarding the future realization of their goal. It is a state of internal conviction that conventional, purely analytical thinking finds deeply disturbing, confusing, and difficult to explain within rational frameworks. Why specifically does this disciplined strategic visualization approach, this intentional use of internal mental imagery, consistently generate such a profound and tangible asymmetric advantage in turning potential into reality? Because the operating system of your powerful subconscious mind, that vast hidden part of your mental architecture, makes absolutely no fundamental functional distinction at its core between a deeply vividly imagined, emotionally charged experience rehearsed mentally and the undeniable tangible reality of a physical experience lived in the external world. The neural pathways and emotional responses fired in the brain during powerful, repeated visualization are remarkably similar to those fired during actual execution. Those individuals who consciously understand and consistently harness the mechanics of this profound neurological phenomenon effectively and reliably program their own internal navigation system, their own deeply embedded mental compass towards specific predetermined objectives, achieving tangible outcomes with a remarkable, often surprising precision and efficiency that seems to bypass traditional, purely conscious planning. When an external observer witnesses and perceives an individual who consistently and purposefully pursues highly ambitious goals, complex challenges, or significant undertakings with a palpable, deeply embedded internal certainty, an aura that emanates from them as if they are already viscerally experiencing their desired future achievement in the present moment, it creates a palpable, powerful presence. This presence is often profoundly intimidating, unsettling, and deeply magnetic all at once, specifically through its sheer, unwavering confidence and its seemingly inexplicable certainty of outcome in the face of present uncertainty. How precisely does one methodically implement this transformative process of neurological mental programming through visualization? Begin the deliberate practice by establishing strict, non-negotiable daily visualization protocols. Commit to undertaking a minimum of 20 consecutive minutes of deeply focused, uninterrupted mental rehearsal sessions every day. These sessions are most effective when conducted in a state of relaxed alertness, potentially coinciding with alpha or even theta brainwave states periods just after waking or just before sleeping, when the subconscious mind is most receptive to programming. During these dedicated visualization sessions, intentionally undertake the mental work of constructing a rich multisensory experience of your specific desired achievement. Focus intensely on incorporating extraordinary levels of intricate detail. Do not limit yourself to purely visual components. Actively integrate the sounds associated with your success, the roar of a crowd, the quiet hum of accomplishment, the specific physical sensations involved, the feel of the desired object in your hand, the visceral feeling of reaching a finish line, the relief of a problem solved, the specific palpable emotional responses that reaching that goal would elicit profound joy, deep pride, quiet satisfaction, radiant confidence, and even relevant environmental specifics, the smells, the temperature, the textures of the surrounding space where success occurs. Most critically and most powerfully, visualize the achievement not from a detached external perspective as if watching a movie of someone else succeeding, but consistently, vividly, and immediately through a first-person embodied viewpoint. Experience it as if you are living it right now, looking out through your own eyes. Consider the compelling case of Sébastien Renaud, a figure who transformed French athletic competition, achieving levels of performance widely considered impossible given his fundamental physical characteristics, measurements, and innate predispositions that expert analysts initially deemed objectively insufficient for championship-level output. When questioned about his unprecedented and baffling rise to the pinnacle of his sport, surpassing physically superior opponents, Renault revealed a core daily practice, what he termed his reality projection methodology. For 3 full years before ever achieving the physical victory, the external triumph, I systematically experienced the sensation and reality of that success internally, he explained with quiet intensity. I did this through a process of complete, deeply emotional mental immersion, undertaken rigorously twice every single day for 15 minutes, precisely upon waking in the morning, and for another 15 minutes just before consciously falling asleep at night. He elaborated on the process. I visualized the entire experience, the challenge, the execution, the feeling of winning, with such intense visceral detail, engaging every sense and emotion that my autonomic nervous system operating beneath conscious awareness could no longer fundamentally distinguish the mental rehearsal from the future physical execution. My body and mind were effectively pre-programmed for success. This disciplined, consistent, systematic process of internal conditioning through vivid visualization ultimately generated a tangible performance capability, a physical and mental synchronicity that competitors who lacked this internal programming found genuinely uncanny, seemingly effortless, and incredibly difficult to overcome. It was an internal revolution that preceded and enabled the external one. Are you currently approaching your significant objectives primarily through the pathway of purely intellectual planning and logical strategizing, the conscious, deliberate mind, rather than complementing it with the powerful, direct pathway of neurological subconscious programming through strategic visualization? Have you perhaps inadvertently confused simple conceptual understanding of your goals with the essential, much deeper process of subconscious, embedded conditioning for their realization? What extraordinary untapped achievements, what currently perceived impossibilities, what radical transformations patiently await you are lying just beyond your reach when you consciously decide to align your entire nervous system, both conscious intellect and powerful subconscious engine, systematically toward specific desired outcomes, effectively hardwiring yourself for success through the consistent practice of disciplined visualization. When your deliberate, strategic mental imagery, your capacity to vividly create and revisit desired future realities becomes a systematically directed, non-negotiable daily practice, something truly fascinating begins to unfold in the external manifestation of your goals. Your vast hidden subconscious resources automatically and powerfully begin to organize themselves and orchestrate their activities, specifically and intentionally, toward the results and experiences you are repeatedly visualizing with depth and emotion. Opportunities that were previously entirely invisible to your conscious mind, external resources that you weren't aware existed, fortunate coincidences that seem inexplicable. Synchronicity itself suddenly begin to appear with remarkable frequency, visibility, and apparent timing as your subconscious mind, primed by your visualization, recognizes patterns and connections relevant to your intended destination that it previously overlooked. The vast majority of individuals consistently operate their pursuit of goals based solely on conscious planning strategy and overt effort, primarily utilizing only a mere small fraction of their potential neurological and psychological capability. Their powerful subconscious mind, the 90% operating system, remains largely undirected and unprogrammed regarding their true ambitious aspirations. Your deliberate, consistent visualization practice, conversely, consciously and directly, harnesses the extraordinary power of pattern recognition, innate creativity, and robust problem-solving capacity of your entire subconscious mind, the deep internal engine. By actively enlisting and directing this immense power, you create an acceleration towards your goals, a momentum that makes tangible achievement feel not like an arduous struggle against the current, but rather like a remarkably efficient, often swift movement, with a powerful unseen internal and external current. This rapid progress appears profoundly mysterious, confusing, and often subtly intimidating to conventional achievers relying only on conscious logic and effort. Remember this critical insight for effective practice. Truly impactful outcome-driving visualization requires profound emotional intensity, alongside intricate, precise, visual and sensory detail. The subconscious mind, The powerful receiver responds most potently and reliably not to abstract intellectual concepts or dry outlines, but fundamentally to deeply experienced sensations and emotions that are richly infused within a vivid mental experience. Therefore, within your daily visualization sessions, consciously incorporate and deeply feel emotions such as profound gratitude for already having achieved the goal, radiant excitement for the process and outcome, visceral satisfaction, and a sense of absolute, undeniable certainty that the outcome is inevitable, that it is happening, that it is yours. Do not simply visualize the end point, the moment of crossing the finish line, the signed contract, the completed project launch. Consistently and deliberately rehearse mentally and emotionally, not just the desired achievement itself, but actively include in your sessions the specific positive character traits you wish to embody, discipline, confidence, resilience, the necessary conscious decisions you will make along the way, the periods of focused execution, and the challenging steps successfully navigated that are unequivocally required for its tangible realization. This comprehensive internal conditioning, this holistic mental rehearsal, ultimately transforms seemingly daunting pursuits and complex goals from feeling like improbable aspirations into experiences that unfold step by step, feeling genuinely powerfully and inevitably real before they manifest externally. Will you make a conscious binding commitment to yourself to deliberately establish a systematic, non-negotiable visualization protocol beginning tomorrow morning without fail? Can you consistently dedicate a minimum of 20 uninterrupted minutes daily to the intentional process of programming your subconscious internal navigation system, guiding your internal power towards your explicit desired reality with feeling and detail? The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that actively and systematically experiences its desired future achievement with such intense, profound, and detailed certainty within its internal landscape, feeling it as undeniably real in the present, that its tangible external manifestation in the world becomes not merely a possibility, but a virtually unavoidable, near-inevitable reality. The ninth pillar, seeking discomfort for growth, the power of strategic discomfort. Throughout the entirety of recorded history, something profoundly distinct and often counterintuitive separates individuals who achieve continuous accelerating growth throughout their lives. Those who consistently reach new levels of competence and impact from those capable individuals who, after achieving a certain level of proficiency, predictably reach an early plateau and subsequently experience stagnation. This key difference lies in their deliberate, cultivated relationship with the experience of discomfort. They do not merely tolerate it. They seek it out, understanding its transformative power. Consider deeply what specific qualities visibly distinguish those rare individuals who consistently maintain accelerating rates of personal and professional development, continuously acquiring new skills, expanding their capacities across multiple decades throughout the lifespan from other equally talented and capable individuals who, despite early promise or success, predictably reach a peak in their abilities and subsequently stop significantly evolving or expanding. Is it solely possessing inherently greater natural intelligence, relying on superior methodological frameworks learned early on, simply benefiting from inherently enhanced opportunities or more favorable starting circumstances? While these factors can undeniably play supporting roles in facilitating progress, beneath them, as a fundamental driving force for sustained elevation, lies something far more essential, something internally cultivated. It is their deliberate, intentional, and systematic pursuit of strategic discomfort, the active engagement with challenge that sits just beyond their current comfortable capability, consciously used as a potent catalyst for perpetual evolution, continuous learning, and accelerating growth. This chosen approach, actively embracing difficult internal states in service of external expansion, is profoundly counterintuitive to conventional wisdom that prioritizes comfort, and it generates a remarkable velocity of personal and professional development that conventional achievers, those comfortable within their established competencies, find genuinely alarming, confusing, and unsettling in comparison to their own stalled trajectories. Why does this challenging, discomfort-seeking methodology, this willingness to lean into the difficult places, reliably generate such a profound asymmetric advantage in sustaining growth? Because the most significant fundamental and profound development in human capability occurs almost exclusively at the dynamic boundary, the fertile friction zone between one's existing capability and the demands of a consciously chosen, appropriately calibrated challenge. The edge of your comfort zone is not the edge of your ability. It is the edge of your current ability. Those astute individuals who consciously, deliberately, and consistently position themselves within this uncomfortable, challenging intersection, this sweet spot just beyond mastery, are systematically, constantly, and rigorously expanding the limits of their fundamental performance capability. They are forging new internal capacities in the heat of the challenge. Conversely, those individuals who consciously prioritize the preservation of their current comfort zone, actively avoiding experiences that induce internal friction or require new learning reliably, and inevitably experience a predictable stagnation in their development. They remain limited to their current abilities, which decay over time in a dynamic world. When an external observer consistently perceives and witnesses an individual who systematically and proactively seeks challenges and difficult experiences, consciously moving towards discomfort rather than instinctively recoiling and retreating from it, as is the natural human tendency, it creates a tangible, often formidable presence. This presence genuinely intimidates and challenges others, primarily through the sheer undeniable force of its relentless, visible evolutionary momentum. It is the aura of someone who is consistently becoming more, who is never settling into a static state of competence. How precisely does one deliberately and effectively implement this growth acceleration framework, this practice of using discomfort as a tool? Begin the conscious practice by conducting an honest, clear-eyed assessment, a true inventory of your current comfort zones. Identify with specificity the activities, the levels of responsibility, the types of challenges, the skills required, and the professional situations you consistently navigate with little or no significant internal strain without having to stretch or adapt in a meaningful way. These represent the areas where you have already achieved a state of comfortable competence, but crucially, where meaningful new growth has likely plateaued. Next, deliberately establish a protocol for introducing structured, intentional, productive discomfort. Make a conscious, recurring commitment to regularly select experiences, projects, or challenges that are calibrated precisely to sit just beyond your current comfortable capability level. This isn't about masochistically overwhelming yourself. It is about strategic stretching, the optimal zone for driving growth. This fertile edge of your comfort zone specifically creates a level of internal discomfort or demand that is sufficient to require adaptation, necessitate learning, and trigger capability expansion, but without simultaneously triggering counterproductive, debilitating anxiety, profound demotivation, or the feeling of being completely overwhelmed and helpless. It is the zone of productive struggle. Actively implement a fundamental governing rule in your self-evaluation. If you consistently, week after week, are not experiencing regular moments of being genuinely stretched, noticeably pushed, and truly challenged just beyond your current comfortable known capabilities, if you never feel that positive internal friction of having to rise to meet a new demand, then by definition, you have ceased to engage in meaningful, substantive, personal, or professional development. This feeling of productive strain is the indispensable signal of ongoing growth. Consider the compelling historical case of Margaret Donaldson, a prominent figure who fundamentally transformed international journalism, rising to a position of significant influence and impact, despite starting her career grappling with a severe, crippling speech impediment. This was an immense, seemingly insurmountable initial obstacle in a profession that demands crystal-clear communication and public presence. When questioned years later about the source of her extraordinary evolution from a hesitant, inwardly struggling reporter to a commanding figure who inspired respect and projected unwavering confidence, Donaldson revealed a structured internal system she deliberately employed, what she termed her calibrated challenge system. Each and every Monday morning without fail, I would send a specific request to my editor for an assignment that was designed intentionally to be just beyond my current documented capabilities. At that time, she explained to captivated industry executives, "It wasn't merely requesting something marginally difficult," she clarified, "but actively seeking something genuinely uncomfortable. An assignment explicitly requiring skills I had not yet fully developed, but importantly, that I knew were conceptually within my potential reach, just waiting to be forged." This methodical conscious system of self-imposed challenge of deliberately stepping into the boundaries of her discomfort consistently, week after week, month after month over years, systematically required her to develop new capacities, overcome internal resistance, and build skills under real-world pressure. This cumulative, disciplined, deliberate comfort zone expansion ultimately forged a profound mastery of communication, a visible self-possession, and an internal authority that many seasoned industry veterans operating from positions of long-held comfort found genuinely uncanny and impressively formidable. Are you currently in your professional role or personal pursuits primarily prioritizing a comfortable, safe competence within your existing skill set, sticking with what you know you can already do well over deliberately seeking uncomfortable experiences that would trigger necessary growth? Have you perhaps unconsciously or overtly confused achieving a perceived performance plateau, a stable level of competence, with reaching a completed level of final achievement, interpreting a static state not as a neutral phase, but rather as a fundamental warning signal, indicating a potential for stagnation in development? What extraordinary untapped capabilities, what levels of influence, what new dimensions of contribution patiently await you, residing just behind the boundary of your ingrained avoidance patterns and your preference for staying within the comfortable and familiar? When your conscious internal relationship with challenge, the experience of discomfort, becomes deliberately proactive, chosen intentionally as a tool, rather than remaining instinctively reactive, prompting immediate avoidance and retreat, something profoundly remarkable and often startling will happen. Your personal and professional developmental velocity, your rate of skill acquisition, your speed of capacity expansion accelerates dramatically, often moving far beyond the linear conventional trajectories of those around you. This generates a visible continuous evolution in your performance and capabilities, a steady, undeniable improvement curve that comfort-oriented observers, those who have chosen stability over growth, perceive as almost supernatural, incredibly rapid, and implicitly intimidating in its relentless upward movement. The vast majority of individuals driven by innate psychological programming to seek ease and minimize friction instinctively organize their professional roles, their projects, and their personal lives primarily around their existing capabilities, the things they already do well, unconsciously shielding themselves from the productive growth-triggering discomfort that arises from stretching into the unknown or attempting genuinely new things. Your deliberate intentional pursuit of calibrated strategic challenge conversely creates a powerful ongoing cycle of continuous adaptation, accelerated learning, and capacity expansion. You systematically and repeatedly trigger productive psychological and neurological stress cycles by stepping into the challenging zone, and then you consolidate that learning and growth through periods of recovery and integration, fundamentally transforming raw innate potential into actualized reliable capability through this cyclical, deliberate process. Remember that while growth involves challenge, strategic discomfort differs fundamentally from indiscriminate punitive or masochistic struggle. The conscious, purposeful objective isn't difficulty for its own sake, nor is it simply pushing oneself to exhaustion without purpose. Rather, the explicit goal is engaging in carefully calibrated challenge difficulty, specifically tuned to sit just beyond current comfort, that triggers precise, intentional psychological, neurological, and skill-based adaptations, rigorously aligned with your deliberate planned trajectory of growth and your most important developmental objectives. Study carefully those rare, inspiring individuals who consistently, over not just years, but across multiple decades, maintain an extraordinary visible rate of ongoing growth development and increasing contribution. You will invariably discover that their minds are architected differently. They consciously and deliberately select environments, responsibilities, and challenges precisely engineered, intentionally structured to consistently demand their continuous learning. their systematic adaptation, and their deliberate evolution, refusing to settle into a static state of past mastery. Will you make a conscious binding commitment to specifically identify at least 3 distinct comfortable zones, areas of predictable ease or routine that you intuitively know are currently actively limiting your personal or professional development, keeping you from stretching into new capacities? Having identified them, can you resolve to deliberately design and courageously establish a strategic discomfort protocol, a systematic plan to actively and consistently confront, engage with, and strategically lean into each identified limitation, starting small and increasing intensity over time? The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that consciously and systematically seeks challenge and embracing discomfort rather than instinctively recoiling from it. Recognizing and actively using discomfort not as a perceived automatic warning signal to defensively retreat and protect current capabilities, but rather as an essential, powerful, and indispensable catalyst deliberately used for achieving extraordinary levels of ongoing growth, expanding capability, and driving relentless evolution. The 10th pillar, owning your universe, the alchemy of extreme responsibility. Something profound, counterintuitive, and deeply impactful distinguishes those rare individuals who consistently transform challenging circumstances, reshaping difficult external realities to serve their objectives, from the vast majority of people who feel perpetually shaped, controlled, and limited by their circumstances. It is their fundamental, deeply ingrained relationship with the concept and practice of responsibility. They don't merely accept responsibility for what is assigned to them. They claim it in full for everything impacting their goals. Consider deeply what core quality truly separates those who reliably create exceptional, tangible results, building and manifesting despite unpredictable or objectively unfavorable conditions, from equally talented and potentially capable individuals who spend vast amounts of mental and emotional energy perpetually explaining, justifying, and rationalizing precisely why success remains frustratingly impossible or severely limited. In the current circumstances, consistently pointing to external factors. Is it simply superior inherent capability from birth? Access to uniquely favorable external circumstances that others lack? Possession of vastly enhanced resources compared to their peers? While these external factors can undeniably play contributing roles and influence the ease of the path beneath them, as a profound internal enabler lies something far more fundamental. Far more internally cultivated, it is their undeniable capacity, their chosen ability to consciously, voluntarily, and unapologetically assume total comprehensive responsibility, taking absolute psychological ownership for achieving desired outcomes unequivocally, regardless of unpredictable external variables, unforeseen difficulties, the actions or inactions of others, or even factors clearly beyond their direct control. This profoundly high level of proactive psychological ownership, this deliberate choice to operate as a cause in the system rather than an effect of the system, systematically generates an intensity of problem-solving focus and resourceful action that excuse-makers, those operating from a place of external attribution, find genuinely disturbing, utterly confusing, and often deeply uncomfortable to witness or confront. They do not understand the drive because they are conditioned to look outside themselves for causality. Why precisely does this highly deliberate, responsibility-claiming approach consistently generate such a profound asymmetric advantage in navigating challenges and achieving difficult objectives? Because in a fundamental universal principle of influence and causality, the effective sphere of your practical influence, your demonstrable capacity to tangibly shape events, change outcomes, and drive progress expands directly, dramatically, and proportionally to the amount of responsibility you consciously and willingly choose to assume. Those individuals who consistently attribute outcomes, especially undesirable ones, primarily or exclusively to external factors beyond their perceived control, effectively position themselves internally and externally as helpless objects, passive effects, simply being affected by circumstances and the actions of others. Their narrative removes their agency. while those powerful individuals who proactively, deliberately, and rigorously claim total, comprehensive responsibility, even for factors outside their immediate control, fundamentally transform themselves internally and externally into powerful causative agents consciously affecting, shaping, and changing their environment rather than merely being subject to it. When an external observer perceives and witnesses an individual who consistently and unwaveringly refuses to adopt the position of a victim, who never blames external factors for perceived failures, who maintains an absolute stance of psychological ownership, regardless of how legitimate, how challenging, or how objectively unfair the external circumstances may legitimately appear to be, it creates a palpable, often profoundly unsettling presence. This presence genuinely intimidates through its aura of undeniable self-reliance, its visible resilience, and its aura of unstoppable resourcefulness, its consistent internal drive to find a way forward no matter what. How precisely does one actively cultivate and embed this powerful level of unwavering psychological ownership and internal agency? Begin the transformative practice by rigorously implementing a systematic excuse elimination protocol in your daily communication and internal dialogue. Make a non-negotiable rule consciously and systematically eliminate the words because and because of external factor from your explanatory vocabulary whenever you are discussing or reflecting upon undesirable outcomes, disappointments, or perceived underperformance related to your goals. This deliberate radical linguistic pattern interruption is a potent cognitive restructuring tool. It forcefully prevents the mind from defaulting to external justification and blame, and instead redirects immediate internal energy and focus squarely toward analysis of your personal contribution potential, internal leverage, and actionable resolution. Next, consciously adopt and apply the fundamental framework of extreme responsibility. When confronting any challenge, any setback, or any less than ideal outcome related to your objectives, make it an immediate default mental reflex to ask yourself honestly and directly, how have I, through my actions, my inactions, my decisions, my preparation, my perspective, created this situation or contributed to this outcome? This introspective question, directed squarely inward, deliberately bypasses the often unproductive orientation of external blame, accusation, or justification, and instantly redirects your mental energy, your focus, and your problem-solving resources directly toward developing and implementing solutions and pathways forward, rather than wasting time and energy constructing elaborate narratives of why something couldn't be done. Most critically, consistently cultivate a powerful internal solution-oriented reflex. Systematically train your mind to reflexively replace problem analysis dwelling on why something went wrong, enumerating obstacles, blaming factors, with an immediate action-oriented shift to solution strategizing. How you will resolve it, overcome the obstacle, or change the outcome going forward. Deliberately transition instantly from the unproductive internal phase of asking, why did this specific thing happen? Whose fault was it? What external factor prevented success? To the empowering phase of asking, okay, given that this is the reality, how will I now proceed to resolve this? What specific steps will I take regardless of how it happened? This requires active internal policing of thought patterns. Consider the historical case of Harrison Montgomery, an individual who orchestrated a profound and baffling transformation of a major American manufacturing operation, significantly increasing its output and efficiency despite having explicitly inherited management of these operations during a period universally acknowledged to be experiencing unprecedented material shortages and widespread debilitating labor disputes. Objectively, the external circumstances were catastrophically unfavorable, providing numerous legitimate reasons for underperformance or even collapse. When questioned, often with a degree of skeptical disbelief about his extraordinary anomalous results achieved amidst those overwhelmingly challenging, objectively catastrophic industry conditions causing widespread failure among peers, Montgomery revealed the core principle guiding his actions: his unwavering adherence to his absolute ownership methodology. While virtually all our competitors, he explained with quiet intensity, were holding frequent, lengthy daily meetings, meticulously documenting, debating, and definitively concluding precisely why their production targets were fundamentally impossible to meet, endlessly citing external constraints beyond their control, We conversely established and operated based on a single governing operating principle throughout the entire organization. We assumed complete, comprehensive responsibility for meeting the targets regardless of the objective, external validity or legitimacy of the apparent obstacles. This internal stance of demanding and accepting absolute responsibility in the face of legitimate external constraint systematically forced Montgomery and his teams to develop, uncover, and implement genuinely innovative, resource-light, unconventional approaches and radical solutions that were completely invisible, utterly unattainable, and outside the realm of consideration for excuse-oriented organizations trapped in the blame the circumstances framework. This pervasive responsibility-claiming approach operating throughout the organization ultimately generated manufacturing breakthroughs and levels of resilience that his competitors trapped in conventional attribution models found genuinely mystifying and utterly bewildering, seemingly impossible to explain through normal business logic. Are you currently in certain areas of your life or work, perhaps unknowingly diminishing the scale of your potential impact and constraining your capacity for problem solving through the consistent, often subtle construction of elaborate, seemingly legitimate justifications for underperformance or limited results? Have you perhaps inadvertently, fundamentally confused having a legitimate explanation for why something didn't work, a factually accurate attribution, with having an optimal internal orientation that drives you to actively change the outcome regardless of cause? What extraordinary solutions, what powerful pathways forward, what transformative possibilities remain undiscovered and unexploited, hiding just behind your entrenched attributional barriers, those ingrained habits of externalizing cause? When your conscious internal relationship with responsibility transitions from being merely conditional, accepting it when it's easy, or clearly assigned to becoming fundamentally total and unapologetic, claiming it for outcomes impacting your goals, regardless of formal role or clear external cause, something profoundly fascinating and empowering will consistently occur. Your intrinsic capacity for creative, innovative problem-solving reliably expands far beyond conventional boundaries and the limitations experienced by others. This powerful internal driver, the engine of absolute ownership, systematically generates solutions, workarounds, and creative pathways forward that are entirely invisible to individuals and organizations trapped in an excuse-oriented, external blaming mindset. This phenomenon is driven purely through the sheer, relentless force of necessity born from internal ownership. When blame is removed as an option, the mind must find a solution. The vast majority of individuals instinctively and unconsciously protect their perceived self-image, their ego, through responsibility deflection, subtly or overtly attributing negative outcomes to factors outside themselves. They construct increasingly sophisticated, plausible justifications for their perceived underperformance or failure to achieve ambitious goals, thereby creating a comforting internal narrative that preserves their sense of adequacy but destroys their capacity for significant influence. Your consistent, visible stance of absolute ownership conversely relentlessly forces your mind and your team's minds into deeply innovative thinking precisely because it systematically eliminates the psychological escape hatch of external blame or justified limitation. It removes the possibility of comfortable disengagement and compels focused action, creating a pervasive, relentless orientation towards solution generation regardless of the origin of the problem. Remember that embracing extreme responsibility, the practice of claiming total ownership, differs fundamentally and importantly from unhealthy punitive self-blame. The conscious, deliberate objective is not an act of harsh, negative, self-critical judgment or punishment for factors outside your control. Rather, the objective is one of strategic positioning, placing yourself mentally and operationally in the most powerful possible position to drive meaningful change and achieve desired outcomes, maximizing your inherent effectiveness. By actively and deliberately assuming total psychological ownership for achieving outcomes that matter to you, even when the starting point or initial circumstances are challenging you, profoundly transform yourself both internally and externally from a passive, potentially helpless reactor, an entity merely subjected to circumstances, into an empowered, formidable creator, an agent capable of significantly influencing and shaping circumstances themselves. This internal psychological stance, this deep embedding of agency, ultimately consistently distinguishes the rare cohort of extraordinary performers and transformative leaders from the far larger group of talented but consistently underachieving individuals across virtually every domain of human endeavor and achievement. Will you make a conscious binding commitment to rigorously eliminating all identifiable excuse orientation, both in your external communication and your internal self-talk, from your behavioral repertoire and explanatory style for the next 7 consecutive days, operating purely from a stance of internal ownership? Having committed to that elimination, can you deliberately identify just 3 specific areas, either professional or personal, where applying and expanding your internal framework of radical accountability and assuming increased psychological ownership far beyond your explicitly defined formal responsibility would likely create a profoundly disproportionate positive impact or significantly increase your capacity to navigate challenges despite existing formal authority limitations? And within this realm of claiming extreme responsibility, can you courageously integrate the foundational institution, the fundamental inner truth from where your actions and vision originate? Can you answer with brutal honesty and clear self-awareness all the truth that lies within the concept of genuine legitimacy? The internal conviction that your actions are legitimate, not merely because you have permission from others, but because they arise from an absolute inner ownership and a deep-seated sense of purpose and value. The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that consciously and unapologetically assumes total absolute ownership for outcomes far beyond reasonable formal expectation, transforming perceived obstacles into springboards, navigating profound complexity, and consistently creating extraordinary, disproportionate results. While those operating from a mindset of external attribution or limited responsibility can find only insurmountable barriers, justification, and persistent underperformance. The 18th pillar, previously listed as 17, folding radical accountability back into extreme responsibility for clarity and slightly reframing definite advantage around the power of definite purpose. The alchemy of definite purpose. Beyond the realm of inherent talent, opportune circumstances, or abundant resources, something profound distinguishes those visionary figures who fundamentally transform entire domains of human endeavor from those others often equally skilled or intelligent who generate merely commendable but ultimately unremarkable, eventually forgettable contributions within those same fields. It is not just intellectual brilliance or opportunity, it is their absolute crystal-clear driving clarity regarding a powerful singular definite purpose, an intensely focused North Star, a purpose that rises transcendentally above vague aspiration, fleeting interest, or diffused effort. This precise specificity of purpose, this intensely focused intention, consistently generates an achievement. Velocity. A speed of movement and progress that those with wandering minds lacking a central organizing principle find genuinely mystifying, baffling, and inherently impossible to replicate within their own lives. They lack the directional power. Why precisely does this approach centered on an absolutely definite purpose reliably generate such an extraordinary disproportionate advantage in bringing about significant world-changing achievement? Because operating fundamentally under inherent principles of energy conservation and leverage psychic and mental energy like physical force creates disproportionate impact when it is intensely concentrated and singularly focused upon a very specific, well-defined objective. Conversely, when that same finite psychic and mental energy is diffused widely across a multitude of directions, fragmented among too many competing priorities, scattered thinly over vague, ill-defined aspirations, it typically produces only negligible scattered movement in any single direction. It cancels itself out through dispersion. Those select individuals who deliberately establish and embody a profound, definite purpose successfully and consistently channel their complete psychic energy, their core mental focus, and their very existential effort toward the singular pursuit and specific achievement of that clearly defined aim. Every decision, every action, every sacrifice, every hour of work is unconsciously or consciously aligned with that one destination. While those who maintain only vague aspirations or dabble in multiple directions inevitably dissipate their identical pool of internal resources, their energy, their time, their focus, their will across a multitude of scattered, disconnected objectives, none of which receive sufficient concentration to build true momentum. When an external observer consistently perceives and witnesses an individual whose entire professional existence, whose public actions, and even whose internal demeanor appear visibly and undeniably organized and driven around a single clear, overriding, definite purpose, it creates a palpable, often formidable presence. This presence genuinely intimidates and profoundly inspires all at once through its undeniable, almost tangible sense of laser-like concentration, its profound internal alignment, and its palpable sense of unwavering directional clarity. The feeling that they know exactly where they are going, and everything they do serves that end. How precisely does one deliberately cultivate and embed this profound level of purpose crystallization, this process of distilling vague interests into a powerful singular driving force? Begin the clarifying practice by conducting a systematic, unfiltered inventory of your current core desires and aspirations. Honestly, document every single significant aspiration, every deep interest, every recurring thought about future accomplishment that is currently occupying your mental bandwidth and drawing upon your limited energy without initially applying any judgment filtering or self-censorship. Just get them all out. Next, implement a ruthless process of priority distillation, a conscious elimination tournament for your desires. Subject each documented aspiration to a rigorous process of evaluation, perhaps structuring it around a single clarifying criterion. Which specific single accomplishment, if achieved definitively, would either render most of the others unnecessary or would automatically, inherently, and inevitably lead to the attainment of the others as a direct consequence? Continue this systematic elimination process, pitting desires against each other based on this clarifying criterion until you arrive at the single core singular achievement that represents the fundamental definite purpose residing beneath the surface of all your peripheral interests and secondary desires. This single point is the ultimate leverage point. Most critically, having identified this core definite purpose, consciously develop and articulate an absolute profound clarity regarding the specific tangible outcome, the concrete result, the visible manifestation that unequivocally represents the definitive fulfillment of that purpose. This requires translating the core idea into a precise, measurable target with unmistakable completion criteria. Transform the potentially vague aspiration, "I want to help people," into a precisely defined, targetable achievement. I will build and scale an organization that provides X type of help to Y many people, by Z date achieving W specific measurable impact. Consider the impactful case of Thomas Wellington using this example similar to the original, but focusing on the purpose clarity aspect more intently. Here, an individual credited with orchestrating a revolution in international economic development despite beginning his work operating with resource levels that expert analysts unequivocally considered categorically mathematically insufficient and prohibitive for generating meaningful, widespread progress in a field demanding vast capital and infrastructure. When questioned with understandable skepticism about the source of his extraordinary disproportionate impact achieved amidst such overwhelming objectively prohibitive limitations and resource constraints, Wellington revealed a core guiding methodology, his absolute, almost rigid adherence to his definite purpose principle, and its role in guiding all action and resource allocation. While my contemporaries, he explained, were dissipating their finite, limited resources by pursuing multiple individually worthy objectives, simultaneously tackling many noble problems, at once I conversely implemented a principle of absolute strategic concentration. I identified a single overriding achievement, a very specific, tangible goal that, if successfully realized, would systematically render all my other aspirations and desired outcomes either fundamentally unnecessary because the core problem was solved or automatically accomplished as an inherent consequence. He wasn't against the other goals, he just saw the master key that unlocked them all. This relentless purpose crystallization, this deliberate, almost obsessive focus on the single most important outcome, systematically created a power of resource multiplication and leverage that remained utterly invisible and incomprehensible to individuals and organizations operating from a place of diffused multi-goal attention. By directing all available energy, financial, human, psychic at a single point, they achieved disproportionate breakthrough. This laser-like purpose, specificity, and focus ultimately generated fundamental developmental breakthroughs, significant progress, and measurable impact on a scale that global authorities, looking only at his initial resource inputs, consistently considered mathematically, economically, or logistically impossible given the objectively existing constraints. It was the force of concentrated will guided by clear purpose. Are you currently, right now perhaps, without full conscious awareness, significantly diffusing and diluting your finite psychic energy, your mental focus, your emotional drive, your time across a multitude of simultaneous aspirations and competing priorities, none of which are receiving the full intensity required to build significant momentum? Have you perhaps inadvertently or habitually fundamentally confused the feeling of engaging in admirable, potentially worthy activity, being busy doing many good things, with the power of achieving optimal leveraged concentration on the truly vital thing? What extraordinary world-changing level of achievement, what truly disproportionate impact is patiently waiting for you, is possible for you, lying just beyond your current patterns of dispersion, attainable only through the systematic, disciplined distillation of your desires and efforts towards a singular, non-negotiable, definite purpose. When your conscious internal clarity regarding your definite purpose becomes not just present but profoundly exceptional, crystal clear, visceral, unwavering, something profoundly fascinating and consistently powerful begins to unfold. You will reliably and consistently accomplish that single core, highest leverage objective, that primary purpose, with a palpable velocity, a speed of movement, a rate of overcoming obstacles that appears genuinely supernatural, baffling, and often subtly intimidating to those observers whose own attention and energy remain visibly fragmented and diffused across multiple directions. This intense focused energy creates a state of achievement acceleration that transcends conventional expectations of progress, driven purely through the sheer overwhelming force of concentrated focused mental energy and intentional direction. The vast majority of individuals unconsciously or passively permit their finite internal resources, their attention, their will, their limited energy to be scattered and diffused across a multitude of individually worthy aspirations, potential interests, or perceived obligations. This inherent diffusion, this lack of a singular magnetic north, causes them to experience perpetual limitation and suboptimal results, specifically through the inevitable dilution and scattering of their powerful attention and life force. Your cultivated, disciplined practice of establishing, internalizing, and operating from a clear, non-negotiable, definite purpose, conversely, creates extraordinary leveraged advantage by systematically focusing the entirety of your conscious psychic energy and unconscious resources with relentless intention toward achieving that one explicit, highest leverage achievement, the core outcome that drives all others, rather than allowing those identical powerful resources to be scattered and ineffective across numerous less impactful objectives. Remember that effective achievement-driving purpose requires not merely vague enthusiasm, passionate interest, or even a general good intention, but fundamentally a relentless, even ruthless specificity regarding the exact desired tangible achievement, the measurable outcome that embodies that purpose. We have discussed transforming raw potential into tangible reality, the undeniable relationship between current capability and conscious challenge as the primary driver of relentless growth. Let us delve deeper into that space, focusing specifically on the intricate ways our mind, rather than instinctively fleeing the experience of discomfort, can be consciously trained to harvest it strategically, systematically extracting growth and resilience from intentional friction. The ample length provided by your request allows us to deliberately linger a while longer on each crucial concept, carefully peeling back additional layers of meaning and exploring further subtle implications. This process, much like the physiological development of muscular strength, which requires not just lifting weights a single time, but undertaking repeated progressive training sessions designed with deliberate intent to increase intensity, follows a similar internal logic. The intricate process of truly forging this type of mind, building its resilience and capacity likewise, demands repetition, a conscious increase in depth of understanding, and an unwavering commitment to exploring various facets and deeper truths of the same underlying principles. Let us circle back, for instance, to the potent power of self-belief and the practice of consciously engaging with fear, not just as a singular daunting action performed one isolated time, but fundamentally as an integrated, ongoing lifestyle. When we consciously choose to face the thing that fundamentally makes us feel fear, the very first time we undertake that challenge is invariably the hardest, triggering the most intense internal resistance. The mind reacts with the powerful ancient signals designed for immediate physical danger. The primal flight or fight response is initiated. But crucially, when you make the deliberate choice to engage with that same challenge or a similar one a second time, although it remains undeniably difficult and activates some internal alarm bells, the intensity has noticeably diminished, a small empirical victory. The third time, it recedes further. This consistent, repeated process of stepping towards perceived threats at its core is a potent form of systematic desensitization. You are actively, through repeated experience, teaching your primitive brain that the intense fight or flight response initially associated with this type of specific stimulus is no longer required at the same elevated, debilitating level. Your internal threat detection system is being methodically recalibrated through lived, survivable experience. With each successful exposure, each step taken despite the feeling of fear, you are accumulating irrefutable, experiential evidence, concrete data into your neural bank account. I performed this action. I felt the fear intensely, and yet I survived. Not only did I survive, I learned, I adapted, I grew slightly stronger because of it. This cumulative acquisition of evidence demonstrating your own capability, resilience, and capacity for successful navigation is profoundly invaluable. The majority of people, conversely, unconsciously or overtly rely almost exclusively on the readily available, easily recalled evidence of past failures, moments of perceived incompetence, or deliberate avoidance patterns to perpetually justify their reluctance to try again, to lean into new challenges, or to initiate difficult tasks. They default to citing history as justification for present inaction. They internalize narratives such as, "I attempted this specific thing in the past, and it proved to be too difficult, terrifying, ineffective." Or applying past data to novel situations, they rationalize, "I have never undertaken this precise activity before, therefore I can almost certainly predict that I will struggle significantly, fail." This is historical evidence being used specifically to build a fortress around the present state of stagnation and inaction. The strong mind, the mind actively under construction, conversely, relentlessly, proactively seeks new evidence data that actively counters the assumptions of the past and expands the perception of future possibility. This new evidence emerges authentically only from the conscious, deliberate act of taking action, despite the feeling state of the present moment, despite the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty. Every single small step consciously taken outside your known comfortable zone is a fundamental piece of undeniable evidence, systematically weighing against your established self-limiting belief about your boundaries and simultaneously serving as empirical proof in favor of a new emerging possibility and expanding capability. And here lies another often unseen yet brutal truth about how our internal evidence systems function. Negative evidence setbacks, criticism, moments of awkwardness, perceived failures tend to be more easily accessed, recalled, and lodged within our emotional memory systems than positive evidence. Quiet successes, small but consistent steps forward, moments of quiet competence. Unless you actively, deliberately, and methodically seek out and emphasize the empirical evidence specifically demonstrating your progress, your resilience, and your growth. Stumbles, perceived public errors, words of criticism from others, and moments of hesitant inaction often leave a deeper, more vivid emotional imprint on memory than quiet, internally driven victories or small, incremental but steady steps forward, which often pass unmarked. Therefore, in the deliberate construction of an iron mind, you must proactively seek out consciously, recognize intentionally, record, perhaps mentally, perhaps in a journal, and even consciously celebrate, even if only within your own internal awareness, those countless micro-moments throughout your days and weeks where you consciously chose to persist rather than surrender, where you opted to confront rather than avoid, where you embraced discipline rather than immediate, fleeting comfort. This is the active process of building your internal evidence library, specifically cataloging and highlighting the concrete, undeniable proofs of the rising strength being actively forged within you. We touched briefly upon the profound importance of cultivating and mastering disciplined daily habits. Let us now drill down deeper into the specific internal conflict that almost invariably arises each and every time you consciously attempt to initiate or maintain one of these desired rituals or disciplined actions. That fundamental conflict is a perpetual struggle and ongoing moment-to-moment negotiation between the pull of your future self, the visionary part of you that desires the significant long-term results, the cumulative greatness built brick by brick, the deep internal strength methodically constructed over time, and the pervasive, demanding voice of your present self, that part of you craving immediate, easily accessible comfort, seeking the path of least resistance in this precise moment. Desiring instant ease and gratification requiring no present effort. Each morning, for instance, when your alarm resolutely sounds at 5 a.m. and the instinctive internal thought arises about hitting the snooze button or rolling over and delaying that internal urge is the immediate self speaking. It is constructing a persuasive, comforting narrative, justifying the path of least present resistance. Just 5 more minutes of warmth and ease. The voice whispers soothingly. You're tired. You deserve rest right now. That is the embedded voice of rationalization, the subtle advocate for fleeting temporary comfort overriding long-term gain. The strong mind, the mind that methodically masters the initiation and maintenance of disciplined habits, does not achieve its consistent output because it feels easy or desirable to undertake the difficult task each morning. It does not spontaneously awaken with a burning desire to exercise to face the most unpleasant task of the day, or to choose salad over comfort food when weary. Its strength comes precisely from the fact that it consciously chooses to initiate and follow through on the required action regardless of how it subjectively feels in that specific moment. This is the precise point where the often misunderstood difference between simply having motivation and embodying genuine discipline becomes crystal clear and empirically demonstrated. Motivation, by its very nature, is a fleeting emotional state. It arrives unpredictably like a muse and departs without warning. It is unreliable. Discipline, conversely, is a conscious, binding, deeply embedded internal commitment to action regardless of emotional state. It is fundamentally stable. Discipline functions powerfully and reliably even, and especially when motivation is nowhere to be found, obscured completely by the dark clouds of inertia, tiredness, or apathy. So, how specifically does one systematically cultivate and embed this unwavering discipline, this inner resolve, making it significantly stronger than the persistent, seductive voice actively tempting you towards immediate ease and temporary comfort? It is by consciously recognizing precisely when that critical internal conflict, that subtle moment of choice between impulse and discipline, is actively taking place, and by having a predefined, often rigid, simple rule or protocol immediately available and ready to deploy to navigate past that crucial threshold moment. For example, throughout your day, there are often subtle moments that could be termed slippage points. The micro-decision points where you subtly contemplate skipping the planned workout session, where you hesitate and debate internally about tackling that uncomfortable task, where you consider delaying the difficult conversation. That precise instant is the core battleground. To win consistently, you need a simple, clear, unyielding rule or trigger to initiate movement, past that threshold of internal debate. Consider implementing strategies such as the well-known 5-second rule by Mel Robbins. When you experience an internal urge or have a conscious thought about undertaking something you know you should do, a healthy or productive habit, you immediately begin a quick internal countdown: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And crucially, before you reach 0, you force yourself to actively begin moving or taking the very first physical action step related to that task, thereby initiating momentum before your debating, excuse-making mind has sufficient time to construct enough compelling justifications to actively talk you out of starting. Or consider the 2-minute rule popularized by James Clear. If a new positive habit or disciplined action such as reading a non-fiction book, engaging in meditation practice, or performing light physical exercise can objectively be started and initiated within a mere 2 minutes or less, make an initial internal commitment to yourself to simply perform only that specific activity for just that bare minimum of 2 minutes. Often and remarkably reliably, once you have overcome the significant inertia of initiation and successfully begun the habit, the initial internal resistance dramatically diminishes, and you will frequently continue the activity for a significantly longer duration. But the strategic minimum commitment is just 2 minutes, a threshold small enough to deceive your present self into thinking it's a minor, insignificant task easily overcome. These are specific, empirically tested psychological tactics, meticulously designed to win the crucial internal battles moment by crucial moment throughout your daily life. The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength fundamentally understands that winning these seemingly small, mundane internal battles on a consistent basis, day in and day out, is not merely an option, but the only reliable way to ultimately secure victory in the much larger war for control of your focus, your actions, and your destiny. We have discussed the fundamental importance of cultivating profound singular focus, the almost surgical capacity to direct your attention and cognitive energy like a laser beam, eliminating distracting peripherals. In our perpetually modern world, inundated with constant stimulation and demands on attention, genuine deep focus is no longer the psychological default state for human beings. It is a scarce, highly valuable skill that must be actively and vigilantly cultivated, fiercely protected, and methodically strengthened through deliberate practice. Literally everything in the surrounding digital and social environment is meticulously designed, algorithmically optimized, and culturally encouraged to actively diffuse and fragment your precious attention resource, the never-ending stream of notifications demanding immediate engagement. The infinite scroll of social media feeds promising novelty. The rapid-fire context switching required between countless applications, open tabs, and competing demands. The entire attention economy actively does not want you to settle down and focus deeply on one single thing. It actively, intentionally wants your valuable attention to be constantly reactively pulled and scattered into as many directions as physically possible, maximizing impressions and interactions. To deliberately cultivate and embed the discipline of singular deep focus is in essence an act of conscious, intentional rebellion against the passive, reactive default setting of the modern environment and the unconscious habits it fosters. It is the power and clarity of deliberately choosing to say no with unapologetic finality to a dozen competing demands, urgent notifications, and tempting distractions, and instead simultaneously, resolutely, and intentionally saying an unequivocal yes, absolutely, to directing your attention fully to one single imperative task or objective at a specific moment in time. This powerful redirection requires regular conscious practice, not merely of adding structure to your day, but actively eliminating or blocking potential distractions and demands. The conscious act of creating large, dedicated blocks of deep work time, sacred, uninterrupted periods, explicitly designated for intense, focused effort on your highest priority tasks, is not simply a superficial time management trick. It is at its core a strategic method of re-architecting the very structure of your cognitive functioning and reshaping its default responses. By consciously establishing and adhering to these protected focus blocks, you are directly sending a powerful, consistent signal to your brain, essentially instructing your cognitive engine, this specific task. This objective is the single most important imperative right now. Everything else, all other notifications, demands, or incoming requests, must unequivocally wait. Our entire collective cognitive processing capacity will be intentionally dedicated exclusively to making progress on this one thing during this specific interval. This dedicated practice, this systematic act of resistance against diffusion, like the other foundational disciplines, will initially and reliably be immensely challenging and demand significant internal friction. Your mind, conditioned by years of pervasive external stimulus and instant gratification loops, is accustomed to jumping rapidly between diverse stimuli, easily lured and stimulated by the newest, brightest, or most apparently urgent notification, which is often, upon calm reflection, not actually the most fundamentally important task requiring deep attention. You will almost certainly experience discomfort, internal impatience, or a subtle anxiety associated with being deliberately constrained to work intently on just one single, often challenging task for a prolonged period. There is a powerful internal temptation to constantly switch, to drift towards something easier, something instantly more stimulating or entertaining, or something that generates the fleeting but shallow feeling of immediate effectiveness and easy wins, like clearing out your email inbox or responding to easy requests. But precisely like the practice of consciously moving towards confronting a fear, each and every time you make the deliberate conscious choice to lean into focused deep work and sustained concentration, despite the ingrained internal temptation to diffuse, scatter, or become distracted, you are fundamentally strengthening the specific neural pathways dedicated to that core psychological capacity. You are reinforcing the neurological wiring for concentration. You are actively and methodically building the crucial willpower muscle required to sustain and maintain intentional attention over extended periods against internal and external resistance. And significantly over cumulative time and consistent practice, this consciously cultivated capability for deep singular focus will transition from feeling like an arduous internal battle into a reliable, powerful, almost effortless skill, a distinct capability that distinguishes you dramatically. While others around you visibly struggle to maintain even 15 minutes of uninterrupted focus on a task without succumbing to the pervasive urge to check their phones, refresh a feed, or switch context, you will acquire the profound capacity to deeply immerse yourself fully into a complex problem or significant objective for hours at a time, consistently achieving a level of understanding, generating genuine creativity, solving intricate issues, and driving output velocity that remains simply unimaginable, inaccessible, and profoundly baffling to those who never break free from the shackles of fragmented attention. It is the undeniable difference between operating only on the superficial surface level of a challenge and actively penetrating deep into its fundamental core, dismantling it and reshaping it through the focused application of deliberate, concentrated cognitive power. The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength does not merely cope with complexity by simplifying it externally. It possesses the internal power, guided by its laser-like focus, to deliberately, methodically, and powerfully penetrate into that very complexity, understand its intricate inner workings, and ultimately bring it under its complete mastery and intentional control. Let us expand just briefly on the profound idea of taking radical responsibility. This transformative principle extends far beyond merely ceasing the habit of external blame or avoiding fault. It is at its most potent level about actively and intentionally seeking out the precise areas and situations within your sphere of influence, large or small, where you know deep down that you possess the capacity, the knowledge, the skills, or the strategic positioning to make a tangible, positive difference, to shift an outcome, or to solve a problem, even if by conventional definition or formal job description, it is definitively not your responsibility or outside your explicitly assigned tasks. In any given situation, any challenge, any setback, regardless of its initial origin, who caused it, or which department owns it on paper, the mind, operating from a framework of radical responsibility, immediately, reflexively, and analytically scans the environment and asks itself the crucial action-oriented question: where precisely is my personal leverage point within this system? What can I, operating from my current position, utilizing my specific skill set, with the resources available to me personally and proactively, do right now to positively impact this outcome, to solve this problem, or to advance this objective unequivocally? regardless of who or what initiated the issue originally or who should address it. This fundamental internal shift represents a profound departure from a conventional, often passive, "I just perform the tasks assigned to me" employee or contributor mindset to adopting the powerful stance of an "I own the successful outcome" creator mindset, a genuine owner of the result. If a specific problem or obstacle is demonstrably hindering your ability to make progress towards your goals or objectives, even if that problem factually originates in another department, lies clearly outside your functional area, or was undeniably caused by the actions or inactions of someone else entirely, the individual operating with a powerful, embedded mindset of radical responsibility does not passively sit by and merely wait for the designated responsible parties to identify and resolve it at their own pace or priority level. They proactively engage, they initiate contact, they strategically offer their assistance, their unique perspective, or their skills. They actively seek out collaborative solutions with others, or where feasible and effective within their operational influence, they may even take steps to identify and dismantle aspects of the problem themselves, directly intervening to remove the constraint hindering their progress. They fundamentally perceive a problem within the system as inherently their own problem, not out of formal obligation, but purely because it is actively impeding their own defined purpose and progress towards objectives. This is precisely why individuals embodying this radical level of self-assigned responsibility consistently generate disproportionately greater impact, wield significantly larger effective spheres of influence, and overcome obstacles far more rapidly than their peers operating only within the confines of their formal roles. They consciously do not wait for permission or authority to be explicitly granted. They strategically and consistently create authority for themselves by actively and deliberately claiming ownership of problems and results. They do not waste time or energy asking who is officially responsible for fixing this particular issue. Instead, they internalize the immediate action-oriented question, how can I, in my current capacity and sphere of influence, claim sufficient responsibility or take effective action right now to ensure this specific thing gets resolved? This deliberate choice, this active embrace of responsibility that extends far beyond conventional expectations, understandably makes those around them who often adhere rigidly to formal role definitions feel surprised, perhaps subtly unsettled, and often genuinely apprehensive, precisely because it so fundamentally transcends the average comfortable established expectation of self-limitation within defined boundaries. The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength does not passively wait for an official invitation or assignment to arrive before initiating a rescue. It actively moves towards where the problem resides and initiates effective action, viewing the resolution as an intrinsic responsibility to its own purpose, provided it possesses the capacity to positively influence the outcome. The critical concept of cultivating an absolutely definite purpose must also be actively and continuously enriched and strategically employed. A definite purpose forged through rigorous distillation is not merely a positive-sounding mission statement or a nice idea to keep in mind. It is the operational, crystal-clear filter standard for literally every single subsequent action you consider, every potential opportunity presented, and every decision you must make regarding the allocation of your finite time, energy, and resources. When you possess a definite purpose as clear and bright as a navigational star, every new proposal you receive, every potentially enticing opportunity that emerges, every novel idea you generate internally or externally is automatically, immediately, and rigorously passed through this unwavering filter. Does this specific thing, this opportunity, this potential action unequivocally and powerfully serve my primary overriding core, definite purpose? Does it move me demonstrably closer to achieving the specific tangible result that I have so clearly defined as the fulfillment of that purpose? If the brutally honest answer returned by the filter is no, or only a little bit, or it's related but tangential, then even an opportunity that might objectively seem attractive or potentially rewarding by other conventional metrics must be consciously, decisively, and unapologetically refused or gracefully declined. Even an intriguing diversion, an exciting side path must be consciously ignored. Even a seemingly brilliant new idea must be intentionally tabled and set aside for now, regardless of its apparent merit in isolation. This is the crucial strategic ruthlessness inherent in possessing an authentically definite purpose. It serves as a powerful, unwavering guardrail. It prevents you from succumbing to the insidious trap of being pulled in multiple directions, simultaneously doing many things that are merely good or interesting, but ultimately lead nowhere truly extraordinary or congruent with your core vision. It powerfully liberates vast quantities of valuable energy, finite attention, and limited resources from being scattered across unproductive or tangential activities, no matter how personally enticing or externally praised they might superficially appear. The vast majority of people lacking a powerfully clear, definite purpose to function as this essential filter standard become inevitably pulled, scattered, and diluted in their efforts by everything that appears vaguely interesting, potentially beneficial, or exciting. They amass a sprawling collection of pretty good projects, half-finished initiatives, and tangential pursuits, but nothing they undertake ever reliably reaches the level of extraordinary singular excellence, precisely because nothing they pursue receives the full, undivided, and continuous concentration of their internal power over the required duration. The mind, guided by a sharp, definite purpose, understands viscerally that the conscious, difficult act of strategically and intentionally saying no, rejecting potentially 99 otherwise good or acceptable things, is not a limitation, but is absolutely essential and necessary to powerfully enabling and saying an all-consuming yes to making one thing, that one ultimate objective, undeniably great. It is a power of non-hesitant, decisive decision-making born not from a simple calculation, but from an absolute filtering standard. The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength deeply understands and actively leverages the profound value and liberating power of the strategic no, the disciplined refusal in its unwavering focused protection of the all-consuming yes, dedicated to its single highest purpose. And finally, let us further amplify and explore the profound, often underestimated capability that we termed the mastery of strategic optimism, what might also be more practically and accurately understood as cultivating tactical realism or informed possibility thinking. This is emphatically not about embodying a naive, passive positivity, ignoring problems, or pretending difficulties don't exist in reality. It is fundamentally about consciously and relentlessly seeing the objective problem or difficulty, analyzing it clearly and honestly as it truly is, realism analysis, but then critically, immediately, and systematically shifting cognitive focus and expending mental energy, not on lamenting its existence or getting trapped in analyzing its negative implications, but directing all mental resources towards actively seeking out and engineering the pathways, the solutions, the opportunities, or the specific means required to overcome that challenge, to navigate that obstacle, or even more powerfully, to extract or create genuine advantage directly from the very presence of the difficulty itself. Strategic optimism, tactical creation. The strategically optimistic individual observes a formidable wall blocking their immediate path. The purely pessimistic observer simply states, "An insurmountable wall stands there. I cannot proceed. This is impossible." The naively optimistic observer, disconnected from reality, passively declares, "Oh, don't worry. The wall will magically disappear on its own. Things will get better." The strategically optimistic mind, grounded in reality, but focused on potential, actively states and internally questions, "Okay, I perceive a significant wall blocking this intended route. What is its height? What material is it constructed from? What observable points of structural weakness does it possess? What tools, resources, or unique perspectives do I currently have at my disposal that I could potentially use to systematically navigate over, dig under, strategically blast through, or bypass this wall? And perhaps most importantly, might the very presence and immovability of this specific obstacle, the fact that the conventional route is blocked, paradoxically, open up or make visible an entirely different pathway, an unconventional opportunity, a novel approach that I would never have considered or even seen if the original route had remained clear and easy? Here lies the fundamental core difference. The strategic leverage point. Valuable mental and emotional energy is deliberately not spent dwelling on the negative fact of the wall's existence, complaining about its unfair presence, or experiencing debilitating feelings of passive defeat simply because it has appeared. That potent internal energy is consciously and purposefully allocated and rigorously employed specifically to analyze the wall's nature, its characteristics, and its position, for the explicit purpose of engineering a viable, actionable method to bypass, dismantle, or strategically utilize it for an unforeseen advantage. This is the power of immediate solution orientation, the mental reflex applied specifically and powerfully to the internal orientation when facing external adversity and significant challenge. And extending this principle, further tactical strategic optimism proactively seeks to create fundamental advantage from disadvantage itself. When confronted by a crisis situation, a challenging market downturn, or a period of widespread difficulty conditions where conventional fearful thinkers tend to instinctively recoil, conserve contract, and passively wait for things to improve, cutting back all initiatives, the strategically optimistic individual, the reality-based possibility seeker, actively poses fundamentally different questions. What unique opportunities invisible to others are now suddenly emerging? Precisely because fewer individuals are competing or taking action. What critical skills can I deliberately develop? What valuable relationships can I strategically build? How can I fundamentally reposition myself or my venture specifically within this new challenging environment to emerge stronger on the other side, to serve an unmet need born of the crisis? To acquire undervalued assets. They do not merely aspire to passively survive the challenge. They consciously intend and proactively seek to thrive and develop stronger, because the challenge itself existed, forcing them to adapt, innovate, and utilize resourcefulness. They actively perceive and process obstacles, constraints, and crises, not as insurmountable stop signals mandating retreat or surrender, but rather as crucial informative input, as raw data points providing essential feedback for refining strategy, and as the necessary environmental pressure cooker deliberately applied to shape them and their efforts into something significantly more resilient, more adaptable, and ultimately more powerful. This internal way of architecting perception, this fundamental difference in how they cognitively interpret external reality, viewing limitations not as dead ends, but as information points marking the boundaries of current known solutions and hinting at unconventional possibilities, is their profound and often perplexing source of power. They generate tangible results and discover pathways that others looking at the same set of circumstances genuinely cannot see or intellectually comprehend, precisely because the conventional perspective is anchored in assessing problems and limitations, while the strategically optimistic perspective is grounded in systematically identifying and engineering potential from the raw material of perceived problems. The mind that inspires a quiet, undeniable fear that radiates true self-forged strength is precisely the mind that fundamentally refuses to permit the current objective reality, the collection of facts and difficulties as they exist now, to rigidly and absolutely define or constrain its perceived potential or possible outcomes in the future. It deliberately and strategically utilizes the reality of the present moment, including all its constraints and challenges, purely as raw, objective data and catalytic pressure, specifically to design, inform, and actively engineer the creation of a fundamentally different, better, and more desirable future reality. These principles, these pillars, this internal architecture, this cultivated way of being in the world, when truly internalized, actively lived, and consistently practiced, day after day in large and small moments, compound steadily, quietly, and relentlessly over time. They are not simply intellectual concepts to be discussed in abstract. They are the foundational mental infrastructure upon which an individual can consciously choose to stand tall, resilient, and fundamentally unwavering, a living monument of self-directed will, amidst a world that is constantly inherently chaotic, often unpredictable, and inevitably seeking to impose its external limitations. One more time then, and let this be the final echoing emphasis. Begin right now, today, this moment to train your magnificent mind as though your entire life, every aspect of it, everything you hold dear, every potential dream you may nurture, every meaningful influence you hope to wield, every challenge you know you must face truly and unequivocally depends on the inherent self-forged strength, the deep-seated resilience, and the cultivated intentionality that resides waiting to be activated deep within that very mind. Because the timeless empirical truth is this, it absolutely and undeniably does. A strong mind, the specific type of mind whose mere presence within a challenging situation becomes a quiet declaration of capability. The type of mind that can consciously face down crushing adversity, objective constraint, and pervasive uncertainty with grounded composure. The type of mind that reliably sees hidden opportunity precisely where others perceive only absolute breakdown or complete collapse. That type of mind is emphatically not a random genetic lottery win, a lucky, spontaneous gift randomly bestowed at the moment of birth. It is a meticulous, conscious, deliberate work of construction. It is actively and intentionally built, brick by psychological brick, neural connection by neural connection, repeated action by repeated action, one focused unit of effort at a time, forged through the intense heat of persistent, concentrated focus, actively and relentlessly protected as if it were priceless, non-renewable gold. Built through the deliberate voluntary acceptance of moments of deep discomfort, the intentional leaning into friction, and even the psychological pain and challenging vulnerability that inherently accompanies the demanding process of genuinely stretching oneself, adapting and being pulled outside the comfortable known boundaries of one's current capabilities. Tempered by unwavering, relentless, unyielding effort, systematically repeated, consistently performed even, and perhaps especially when no one else is observing the struggle, even when you genuinely feel no spontaneous reserves of motivation, inspiration, or easy flow. Every single tiny micro-distraction you consciously, deliberately, and successfully resist throughout the demanding currents of your days. Every single internal or external fear, however large or small, that you consciously, courageously choose to confront head-on rather than instinctively recoil and flee from. Every single new positive disciplined habit you consciously and successfully establish and meticulously maintain, consistently adhering to it despite the pervasive seductive temptation of choosing temporary easier ease or short-term gratification. Every single crucial decision you consciously force yourself to make with cultivated clarity and necessary speed, even amidst uncertainty, rather than becoming paralyzed by passive delay and perpetual deliberation. Every single significant moment where you consciously, intentionally, and consistently choose to proactively seek solutions and embrace total, uncompromising responsibility for contributing to the outcome, instead of defaulting to easy justifications, blaming external factors, or simply waiting for someone else. All of those cumulative moments, when added together, practiced and reinforced repeatedly over time, when integrated into the very fabric of your internal operating system, systematically and undeniably make the very architecture of your fundamental mind into something profoundly, unassailably unshakable. It doesn't just become strong relative to others, it becomes a veritable internal fortress, a psychological bastion that simply cannot be penetrated, undermined, or significantly dismantled by the conventional external arrows of doubt, fear-mongering criticism from others, or the inherent unpredictable chaos of the external world. So, standing on the foundation of this profound truth, cease passively, waiting for some external feeling of confidence to magically appear before you take action. It is not something that descends upon you spontaneously. Stop simply hoping that inner strength will somehow conveniently arrive when you need it most. It is not a passive asset randomly assigned. Instead, with the knowledge and clarity you have now absorbed, consciously begin the work of building it. Make the disciplined commitment. Take active ownership of that internal forging process. Set your will, sculpt it, discipline it. Methodically, forge an entire mindset, A comprehensive way of existence, a consistent way of processing information, a fundamental way of encountering reality, facing challenges, and engaging with the world, a mindset so profoundly resilient, so systematically forged, so fundamentally unshakable that even your periods of disciplined silence, even the quiet-centered power of your mere self-possessed presence alone, are undeniably sufficient to command profound, authentic respect from those around you. Even the chosen absence of your uttered words consistently carries an undeniable, palpable weight and deep significance that is instantly recognized and respected. And the absolutely non-negotiable time to begin that immediate, challenging, yet infinitely rewarding work of internal architecture, that conscious construction, that critical time is emphatically not a vague, comfortable tomorrow when circumstances might feel easier, or a hypothetical point in the future when you might magically feel spontaneously ready without prior preparation. The only time that matters, the time where this power truly begins to be unleashed, the time is unequivocally now. That decision, that foundational commitment, that internal act of binding oneself to the difficult work required to directly face inherent internal weaknesses and deliberately begin the systematic process of internal construction begins precisely and only at this moment in this awareness. And it is solely and exclusively through the relentless, disciplined, conscious execution of these principles day in and day out, step by step, layer upon layer, the pillars we have now so thoroughly dissected and explored together within this continuous narrative flow. It is only through that consistent application that you will authentically unlock and fully unleash the raw, potent, latent power that your incredible mind has possessed, perhaps unknowingly, all along. Possessed, yes, but merely waiting patiently dormant for you to make the conscious, intentional decision to finally activate it, direct it, and embody it through deliberate action and persistent will. Do you, the listener, the one who has journeyed persistently alongside this extended, continuous narrative flow, do you now possess deep within sufficient courage, sufficient foundational will, sufficient committed intentionality to consciously accept that profound internal architectural challenge? The challenge to build the mind not merely designed to cope with life, but to actively, intentionally, and masterfully govern and shape it. The ultimate challenge to consciously transform yourself into the undeniable creator of what is genuinely meaningful and impactful within your unique personal universe.